here, right now. Calling out to all area crew, we gon' make it all happen right here, right now. Calling out to all area crew, we gon' make it all happen right here, right now. Calling out to all area crew, we gon' make it all happen right here, right now.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. It's Ryan here with Mike doing a special edition of the Eggs Show.
Yeah, we're going to do a clip show.
Yeah, a clip show. Now, I don't know. We haven't gotten a ton of feedback from people as to, whether or not they even like these things. But every now and then, circumstances warrant that we put together a little clip show to cover for travel and holidays and things like that when either Mike or myself aren't available.
Well, this week I'm in Idaho and you're in New York, and trying to line up a guest and do a three-way Skype and do it just didn't quite work out. So, in lieu of another just us talking for an hour and a half, we're gonna put the clips together.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. So anyway, as we're recording this, it is 12:15 in the morning in New York.
It's 10 o'clock here in Idaho. So.
Yep. So it's getting late over there, but I'm tired, and it is late here. And but I've been out here for kind of a crazy week. We're working on a pitch for a project or for a client here in New York. I can't talk too much about it, but they're in the banking world, and I'm really excited for the way things are coming out. The project looks great. Got 3 solid directions that we've built out over the last couple of days, and I think it's going to be a really good pitch. The pitch itself is on Friday, so right now we're busy preparing content and getting decks together and things like that. And so anyway, so I'm out in New York working on that stuff.
How long are you out there for?
I got out here Monday, and I come home on Saturday. So, however, I will admit I'm taking part of Friday so that we can go check out some museums and do a little looking around New York. I don't get out here too often. Really, this is actually, I think, my maybe second or third time here. And definitely the most amount of time I've had to spend in New York. And, and I just love it. It's great. The city is cool. Everything here is great. I do need to try and track down a couple great sneaker shops. So if anybody knows some, hit me up. Although I was just in LA last week before I came here.
Yeah,
as we talked about on the previous show. And I ended up buying a couple pairs of shoes there too. So I'm not sure if I should come home with more, but but I'm in New York, for God's sake, and I'm sure they've got some sweet sneaker shops here, so I might go take a look.
Yeah, good deal. Yeah. I'm back in Seattle this weekend, so we're both traveling. I got to go do a wedding, but it should be fun. Yeah,
that'll be great. No, I know you've been talking about that one for a little while, and hopefully you had mentioned maybe tracking down a couple old friends and stuff. Maybe some podcast guests.
Hopefully,
and so that'll be cool. How long are you gonna be up there?
I have to turn and burn. I'm just going up for the wedding on Saturday. And
then coming right back.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So, it shouldn't be too crazy. Anyways, the snow's gone.
That'll be great. Yeah, it's great. It's finally turning into spring. Actually, they're saying here in New York it's supposed to be about 70 degrees on Friday.
Nice.
So we were encouraged to take a ferry out and around the Statue of Liberty and check out all that stuff.
Have they cleaned that up? Have you been down there at all?
Well, the client I'm working with is in Manhattan, like sort of downtown financial district, and my hotel's like a block from there. I'm actually right next to that famous bull statue.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm like right at the southernmost tip of Manhattan. And so we can actually just walk half a block over and we can see the Statue of Liberty and stuff from our from the sidewalk there. So it's a cool location. And actually today, as a team, we all went up to the World Trade Center and went up to the top and got to look over the city and stuff. And it was pretty cool. More than anything, it did a lot to try and help you get your bearings,
so
try and figure out where north and south is, where the different parts of the city are and stuff. And I'm still trying to learn the city, so it was really helpful for me.
Well, Seattle's the same way. If you ever try to drive downtown Seattle, the first, 30 times you try it, you get lost.
Yeah.
There's just so many one-way streets, and it's going up, and
yeah, that's how it is here too, for sure. So I guess the nice thing here is everything's kind of grid-like. So if you have a good handle for where you are in the city, you can probably get around pretty easily.
Cool.
So, but I will say the one exciting thing that happened coming out is I was actually on the same flight as my beloved Real Salt Lake.
Oh, no
which
way.
was kind of cool. And so I had the opportunity to meet the coach, Mike Petke, Albert Rusnak, who's one of my favorite players, as well as a handful of other players, give them well wishes and stuff.
That's the photo of everyone on the phones, right?
Yeah, if anybody pays attention to my Instagram, I took a picture of the entire team sitting on the edge of the luggage return, all on their phones. Nobody talking, nobody doing anything. They're just, here's 14 guys, looking at their phones. It was kind of funny. But I did get a minute to speak with Albert, and that was really cool. I appreciated him taking a minute to rap with me, and some of the other guys were friendly and cool to say hi to and everything. So it was kind of a cool thing. Now, as of this very moment, I had planned to maybe go watch them play today. They were playing here in New York at Yankee Stadium against NYCFC. And I ended up having to go to dinner and an event with our team after work today. And so on the way back in the Uber, I happened to glance at the score, and they got their asses handed to them, 4-0. So I was a little bummed, but it did sort of redeem me for not having seen them. So,
yeah, that would have been even worse.
I would have been bummed. I mean, it would have been cool to see Yankee Stadium and stuff because I've never been there, and it would have been cool to just sort of do that whole thing. But for such a beating, I don't think it would have felt very good to go. So anyway, better luck next time, guys, and yeah, hopefully we'll catch up in Salt Lake sometime. I feel like we're kind of bros now.
So how does they keep track of like the cumulative points, right? So if they lose 4 to
well,
1,
what they do is, so for every win they get 3 points, every draw they get 1, and for every loss they get 0. And then at the end of the year, the team with the most points advances.
So then,
So these win or losses right now, in the scope of 30 game season, they're not the end of the world, but you only get so many of these, and then they start to add up.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, so right now our record isn't as good as it ought to be, and hopefully we'll pull the nose up on that before too long.
Well, the season's still fairly new, right?
Yeah. It's this is our maybe 3rd or 4th game this season.
Okay, so not a huge deal.
Yeah, so just getting going, but hopefully we're getting warm and fired up. We've got a pretty good looking team right now, so hopefully we'll be able to turn it back around and be on our way to a championship this year. Pretty sure. I don't want to predict it though, because I don't want to be so optimistic, but I am hopeful they do well.
You still have all the season tickets, right?
Yeah,
nice.
we've got seats down at Rio Tinto Stadium in Salt Lake, and it's just a blast. We love it. We take friends, we take family, everybody to the games, and it's always a good time.
I've been a few times,
looking forward to it.
And the last time was that rainy, crazy mess.
Yeah, it's definitely better in the spring and the summer when the weather's good, and so hopefully it's also becoming spring in Utah, so hopefully the weather will get good and the games will be good. We actually didn't go to the last home game just because my wife and kids weren't interested in standing in the snow.
Oh, it was still snow on the ground?
Yeah, just cold and wet and shitty. So, so we didn't end up going.
But you watched it on TV.
Yeah, from the comfort of my couch.
Yeah.
So all right. Well, without any further ado, then, let's get into the clips.
All right, so first we got Ian Paget.
Yeah, so Ian Paget, for people who don't remember, he was on the show. He was, or is, the owner and proprietor of LogoGeek.uk. It's a website that specializes in logos, and he's a logo designer himself, and he's got a company that you can sell logos, or he buys. He sells logos that he designs and everything, so you can hire Ian to design a logo for your company, and he's a really talented guy, really interesting dude, and a lot of fun to talk to.
Yeah. Didn't he just launch like a new season of his podcast?
Yeah,
he does it in seasons, right?
Yep, he's got a podcast himself, and he's rolled out the second season. And just recently, maybe the most recent guest was this guy Tom Geismar, and I might be butchering how you say that, but he's the guy who created the Xerox logo, Mobile One logo, Chase Bank.
So this was in the early days of logo design.
Yeah, well, and those are some of the biggest, most iconic marks. Yeah. There are. So I mean, that's a really good get, and I'm sure it's really interesting. I'll have to go back and take a listen myself.
Yeah, me too.
But anyway, so do check out his podcast. I think it's just called the Logo Geek Podcast. But if you can't find it there, I'm sure you can find it just at the website. So logogeek.uk. And without any further ado, our friend Ian Project.
Yeah, coming back off that little tangent, let's start talking about Logo Geek. How did you make the decision to go into business for yourself? When did you decide it was time to come out that way?
This is probably another fairly long story. So I've been working for a web agency for the last 10 years, and I've always liked to practice at home and learn new things at home. So I've done, over the 10 years of working for different companies, I've worked on things that have kind of interested me. So that could be like CD covers when I first started, to working on movie posters, to working on computer games, for example. So there was one really big kind of side project that I worked on that was actually an iPhone game, and that was a very long-term project, but it got me into the habit of working a lot in my evenings and weekends on something. And even though that was a long-term project, and by the end of the 4 years that I worked on it, I was pretty exhausted. After a few weeks of not having anything, I wanted something else to work on, but I didn't want long-term projects. I wanted short-term projects. So that's when kind of logos came up, because I've enjoyed working on logos when I've had the opportunity, but I at that time within my job, even though I sometimes worked on them, it was like once a month or once every 2 months. It was very infrequent. So I wanted to learn more at home. So I thought, I'm going to start with that. And it was always just intended just to be a hobby, just to learn and improve it. I never, ever at any point planned for it to actually be a business. So how it kind of started as I initially needed a URL. At that time, I knew a little bit about SEO, and I wanted a name that had a logo in it in some way. And at that time, there was only the .co.uk's or .com that was an option. So I listed down all the possible options, tried everything. And after, trying like hundreds of things that came to mind, nothing was there, there was nothing, and it was driving me crazy. And I think I down on my list, I had Logo Geek, and I thought that's not going to be there, but I typed it in, and you know what? .co.uk was there. And even though for what I wanted to do, I wasn't 100% sure of the actual Logo Geek name, and wasn't sure of it for a number of years, but it felt like a good name. And I've always been interested in Comic-Con and stuff like that. So I thought maybe Logo Geek could work, and I could go and sell logos at like Comic-Con and just do like hobby projects. Because I've always been interested in comic books and movies and stuff like that, and I thought that could be a nice thing to do with that. But anyway, anytime I worked on a logo, I kind of posted it on this website, added a little bit of content. I never actually expected anyone to ever go to that website. But after just working on it for a few months and just adding on projects and, blogging and stuff like that, I eventually had customers. The very first were just friends and family, but there became a point where someone got in touch that wasn't someone I knew. And that was a fairly big deal, because at that time, I was just doing stuff for friends for like small amounts of money. I mean, you're talking for a logo project like £50, £100. Now I'm doing them for like a couple of grand, but actually getting a real customer, that was surprising. I never expected that, and I like I said, I never actually planned to take anything freelance, but I slowly started to build my own business. I liked that I had this full-time income coming in, and then when I wanted to do a project, if I wanted a little bit more money, I could take on a project, so if I wanted to book a holiday, that's how I was making that money for it.
It sort of gives you a little extra freedom, even though it's more work. I mean, it gives you more opportunity to control your income and your time and everything else. It's kind of cool. I wanted to ask you too, as you mentioned, at Logo Geek, you specialize in logos. You're hyper-focused on that singular service. I wanted to ask you, there are some different schools of thought on this too, sort of the jack-of-all-trades model, which would be more like an ad agency or a full-service shop, versus sort of the master of one. So in your case, as a designer and sort of based on your experience, you could certainly offer more services than just logos. So, but I wondered if maybe you could speak to the sort of the decision of staying focused like that, because I think there's a sort of a teachable something there, focusing versus delusion.
Yeah. Okay. So what I learned from experience was that having one product, I mean, the reason why I was working on a one product was because it was in my free time. But what I found is that you can create template emails, template quotes, template process. You can also hyper specialize in marketing. So from an SEO perspective, all of the content on my website is around logos. So in terms of search terms on Google in the UK, I'm ranking really well. So, you're talking page 1, page 2 for really good keywords. And also from a social media perspective, it's super focused content. So there was points when I considered maybe I don't want to just do logos. Maybe I want to do illustration or, other things.
Sure.
But anytime I added on any extra product, like say if someone wanted a website, I could build the website, or I could work with someone else that could build the website. But every single time, when it came to a logo, I just had all this stuff, and like a sales inquiry would come in, and I could just bash them out. It's really easy. But when it came to anything else, I really had to go into detail. I had to learn more about it. I had to create a new quote, had to kind of create a new process. It was effort, and it took time, and it just wasn't worth it for me, because a logo project, doing it just on the side, like now, just so that you understand, it's actually part-time. Like that job, I'm transitioning to working on Logo Geek more full-time eventually. Mm-hmm. But it was so much easier to make the same amount of money just focus on one thing versus trying to add on these other things,
Well, and it's interesting. It's actually like surprisingly is maybe not the right word, but I mean, it's actually a very good idea to this idea of specializing in this one service, like you mentioned some of the benefits, in terms of social media and things like that. But you're also lucky because like every designer I know, logos are all they want to do anyway. Yeah. And so you also pick the one product that they all want to do. And so, I mean, that's, in terms of sort of scratching a creative itch or doing something, with your own creativity, logos are a great product. And then I can tell, through some of the other support things that you're doing, the podcasting and the social media, which we'll get to in a minute, it's clear that it's sort of a passion, as much as it is also a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's beneficial for me because it's allowing me to stand out from the competition. There's all these agencies out there doing similar things. There's freelancers doing similar things, but a lot of the freelancers do everything. I'm one of the only people in the entire world, I might be wrong, but one of the only people in the entire world that's easy to be found, that's really passionate about logos. So I've got my social media, I've got the Facebook community, I've got the podcast now. You know what? With podcasts, search logo on podcasts, there's like None. There are none. I like literally, how long's the podcasting platform been out there?
And no one's doing anything on
There's
logo
no
design.
one's doing anything. So I've literally, it's just sat there. Just that's not why I did it, but
Yeah, well, it's a nice little side product.
I've got that. So there's a lot to logos, and within the 5-6 years I've been doing this now, I'm very quickly becoming seen as one of the experts or a leader in this field, purely just by being fascinated and by not doing other things, like in terms of social media posting and blogging. That's literally all I've been doing for years, and from an educational perspective, it's amazing too, because I want to find more stuff to share in my community. So when I buy a book, what topic of book am I going to buy? I'm reading more and more and learning more and more on one specific topic. So from my point of view, even though I started as someone that maybe just did like 10 logos, now I've done several hundred, and I've read everything that there is to find. I've watched everything, and I've been lucky enough to be able to spend time with people who are legends, and just asking questions, and being so hyper focused. From a business point of view, it's fantastic, but from an educational perspective too, being specialized, you can really focus and learn so much about one specific topic, probably to the point that in that time I know more than what most people will in their lifetime, trying to juggle everything.
Welcome back. That was Ian Paget. LogoGeek.uk is the website, and hopefully that was as entertaining for you as it was for us. We had a really good talk with him. So this next clip is from our friend Almighty Red, who I have every intention of maybe trying to track down while I'm out here in New York. Almighty Red is the manager of producer DP Beats. He's one of maybe maybe one of the hotter producers coming up right now. He's just recently worked with Khalifa and some other people.
Big names.
Yeah, Almighty Red was behind the U.S. launch of the Borja Factor's favorite rapper, Young Beef, here in the States, and which I believe is doing gangbusters right now, doing really well.
Well, that's cool.
And Almighty, we should just call him Red, right?
Sure.
Red's producer, DP Beats, just recently put out a track with Lil Uzi Vert called Bands, Bye Bye Birdie. It was just dropped actually earlier this evening on Foul Hundreds.
Yeah, he was all playing it for me through the headphones, like, check this out.
But yeah, really cool track. I encourage you to check it out, and really anything by DP Beats is great. So for people who didn't hear it, or maybe if you did, our conversation with Almighty Red was actually really insightful. We sort of thought it might be very hip hop centric, things like that, but he really was open with behind the scenes look at the business, sort of his career, his sort of rise through the ranks, and all the work he's done. And I think, at least for me, and I don't want to speak for Mike, but at least for me, I felt like it was one of our better interviews.
Yeah, I really
and it sort of
enjoyed
caught me off guard. I just
didn't
know what to expect.
True, honest conversation, and like, we got into some cool stuff. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so. I guess I didn't know what to expect going in, and I was very pleased with the results. So without any further delay, here's Almighty Red.
Started, we're in the scene. We look towards these venues that are only $5,000 to rent, or $2,500 to rent, or $1,500 to rent, where we can get 3, 4 people, 5 people together in our collective and patch up and put the money down to do the deposit, to rent the venue, to then bring the people that we know to do the show, to make money, to pay the people, to split back the venue. Even with that process, and even with us doing that and still creating memorable moments, it still gets bought out by big business when somebody wants to come to you and present a check to buy out your whole building.
Yeah, so was that kind of your forte, was going in and getting a warehouse and leasing it for a
Pretty
year?
much, yeah. Pretty much in South Florida, yeah. I mean, I was doing shows in South Florida, like we had a show called Nameless, where we would take a rapper or an artist from one county and take another rapper or an artist from another county and pair them together. And the reason why I did that was because I wanted to have fan bases from different counties come together on a common neutral ground and share their energies and share their music and share like what they do and where they come from. It's a great way to break the ice when it comes to territorial, situations. And it also allows people to collaborate. And from a branding standpoint, it gives you the opportunity to stretch your wings, and you're able now to spread even more. Now I have a fan base now from people from another county in Miami-Dade County. I'm from Broward, but I have people now in Miami-Dade County because of the word of them coming over to my show and seeing something different. So we did a lot of that. And that's what goes on in South Florida. I can tell you guys right now, from 2013 to 2015, 16 heavy, until like all the venues went away, everybody was doing that. We were all doing shows. I mean, we had Wynwood down there. We had the Art District. So, we would all do shows. We'd do Art Basel every year. I mean, that was really the hunger. And a lot of us down there was just doing shows because people wanted to express themselves. So I noticed that very early, I created the website to give people a platform to express themselves.
So what did the website do specifically? Was it a place to host music? Was it a place like a forum to discuss, It
was a place to host music. So basically we would drop and premiere people's mixtapes, albums. I did rock music. We did rock music, hip hop, R&B, gospel. I mean, I did everything. If you were from South Florida, I was going to post it just because of the fact that I wanted to give people that exposure, because other websites at the time were more on the political, if I know you, I'll post it, or, you got to know you got to know the editor, or you know how those things go. So I just wanted to give like my city that I was born and raised from the opportunity to project themselves to a .com space that can get out to mass amount of people in a blink of an eye. And I accomplished that with, the help of Wendy, Giovanna, AKA Giovanna, and Taylor and Nashley and Ocean. I had a strong group of people around me that helped. So
cool.
It was a big wave.
Maybe this is a good place to transition into then. So you're executive producer and manager of DP Beats. Mm-hmm. But clearly you came from this background of event production and promotion and all this stuff. Can you talk a little bit about what the role is of an EP and the type of work you do as a manager, not just to support DP, but any artist?
Yeah, absolutely. So as an executive producer, so I have a bunch of beats from DP, or I have a lot of beats from Dolan Beats, who's a good friend of mine also that I've worked with, I've done business with before. Other producers as well, Trap Money Mellow, the list goes on and on. I have a lot of people, Bass Kids. So what I do is I have all these beats, and I know a lot of these artists throughout the country. I know their sound, and I know what they would sound good with. So I will pick a certain amount of beats to give to them for them to rap on. So a lot of records that you may hear, like a Young Beef record, that CBR record, like I picked that beat for him to rap on, and I told him that the record would be hard. The record is hard. Yeah, say that again. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I love that track. I mean, CBR.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so the CBR record just kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, he didn't know DP like that, but I listened to some of his work with Steven Lean, which is a good friend of mine too, Steve Lean. So I listened to some of his work, and I knew what type of sound would go with him. So I basically just put the records together. But by managing any artist, especially with DP as a producer, I've managed rappers too. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work dealing with an individual, especially of the magnitude of DP as a producer. I have everybody in my email. I have every A&R from every record label you can think of asking for beats, from Atlantic Records to 300 Entertainment to Universal Music Publishing Group to APG, which is a part of Atlantic. Everybody, for all the artists that are either just getting out of incarceration or they need to start them up or whatever the case may be. It's a lot of work, but it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to do. And it's, how should I say this? Managing somebody with a career like that is really, it's like a emotional responsibility that you have to that person too. If you do not care about this person genuinely, it will never work. You have to be totally invested into these people when you work with them. You have to take their best interests at all times, and you have to be very, very, very on point with what you do. Especially with DP, we have deadlines. We have certain beats we have to submit at certain times with people. We have certain clients that we have to make sure that we cut snippets on a consistent basis that I have to do that, or he has to do. Snippets is not easy when you have to take a whole beat and you have to cut it down to 45 seconds. And you have to do that for like 10 or 15 beats to give somebody a decent amount to sample from to see which ones that they would like to purchase.
So how does that work? Because I mean, like you're taking a 3-minute track and there's, you got your chorus, your verse, all these different parts of the song. Do you just kind of pick the part you like the best and send it to the artist and say, hey, what do you think?
Basically, I send in the intro to I'll send in the hook basically, or the lead into the hook. So when you first hear DP on the beat, sometimes I'll do that and I'll just let it play out for like a minute so you can hear. I'll probably give you a little bit of a 16, maybe I'll give you 8, but I will probably let you get a nice 1-minute feel of the beat so you get an actual feel of the beat. A lot of other producers, you'll hear them give you like 15, 20 seconds and they'll tag the hell out of it. It's like, how can somebody get a proper sound of the music that you're trying to sell to them if you're tagging the hell out of it and you're making it short? So for us, business-wise, we like to give people long snippets. Like our beats are 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but we'll give you a minute so you get a decent sound to it.
So in the label, I can't even talk, the label world, how does it work for a producer versus like the artist? So the artist, they try and go after 360 deals. They try and do this. Do you just get your flat rate and that's what they get for the beat, or do you get residuals, or?
You get residuals. So from a producer standpoint, you can get an administration deal. You can get a publishing deal, which is somebody's taking over your publishing, which means they have a percentage of everything that you do, basically. So if you sign, even as a rapper, if you sign to a label, they're gonna ask you for your publishing. So that means anything that you do with your name on it.
Yeah, they want your merch. They want your
whatever.
Yeah, everything.
Whatever. They want a percentage of that. Now, if you're good and you're popping and they want to put a campaign behind you and put some money behind you, they'll give you an advance. But the advance is a loan, and the advance is based off of what they think that you're going to project 6 months from now or 12 months from now. They will not exceed the advance off of the projection. So in your head, you may think you're worth $150,000, but to them, you may only be worth $50,000. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So the way that, and then when you sign the deal, they're taking anywhere from 60 to 70 to 75. If you got screwed, 80% of your publishing, and you're only keeping 20% of it. So think of it. You guys understand math and logic. If you're only getting 20% back of what you are worth, and you are now taking an advance, which is a loan on $150,000, and you're only getting 20% back, how do you expect to pay that back?
Yeah, it makes zero sense to me.
Pay that back to get to zero.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Well, and so maybe this is a good time to ask this question. You mentioned a moment ago Atlantic Records, and there's a story floating around right now where they've sort of been accused of underpaying producers by retitling albums mixtapes rather than albums. Do you have any experience with that? Is that something that affected you guys?
In regards to Atlantic, shout out to Atlantic. First and foremost, I'll say that, I know of one of their big A&Rs over there. Shout out to Wartenberg. He's doing a great job over there. He's the A&R for Kodak Black, PNB Rock, A Boogie. And I think he got a little situation with Extension too, so shout out to him. But I've seen those situations happen. They do happen. What I can speak on is that I'll give you guys an example. So we had a situation with an artist. I gave this artist beats, gave him the beats. They ended up using the records. They used 6 of them. He ended up getting signed. So this artist ended up getting signed before. When I gave him the beats, he wasn't signed. When he did the records, he was now signed
with your beats.
Exactly. So now the label. So for us, okay, we sell our beats and we do executive rights on our beats. Let's just say at that time we were doing it for $3,500 a beat, and then we get splits on the royalties, obviously, because we're the producer, so we're a part of the composer, so we get pieces of that. The label at the time decided to not push the records. The records are still unreleased to this day, partly because they don't want to pay the
percentage,
the fees that is going to cost to get the beats to the beats from us. So it does happen.
We used to work with bands down in Phoenix, more rock oriented bands, and one of the bands we worked with, I think it was Capitol or Sony, one of the bigger labels, and they had an artist that was very similar to them. That was their first, pretty much, and they signed this band that we worked with pretty much just to record them and sit on their tracks, so that they wouldn't be a competition to this other artist that they were working with. And I mean, does that happen in the hip hop world, or is that more?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, big time. I'll give you an example too, just to further the point. So you have a situation like us where we're independent, and you have a situation like, let's say, Atlantic Records or any of these other places. A lot of times our records will get shelved or get shut down due to the fact that, there's other producers at other labels, and they would rather keep the money in-house. And we don't take that as disrespect. We look at it that's just a part of business. So you think of it from this perspective. If I'm Atlantic Records, and let's say you're a producer and you have a hot record with one of my artists, if I put it out and put money behind it, you're going to be getting all the money from it, and I don't have a situation with you to recoup any of the money back that I'm putting up to get you hot. So I'm giving you basically free promo, and you're going to be eating off a bunch of money from the royalties of it.
Yeah.
Labels will never do that.
Yeah.
So in rock, hip hop, gospel, whatever, you know what I mean? Everybody's going to want to keep the money in-house.
Yeah, well, and that makes sense. I mean, right? I mean, as you said, it's just a business decision.
It is, but it sucks though, because you get shelved a lot. So
yeah, and that's unfortunate.
You get individuals who they'll do records with you, they'll get shelved, and then they'll have their producers or they'll have their rapper reference off of your record to get a feel for it and make a type record, and then they'll put the money behind it and then let the record get legs on it.
Yeah.
So that type of stuff happens too.
Yeah, it's dirty, but.
So that was Almighty Red. Great little interview there.
Yeah, really cool. Like we talked about before the clip. I mean, it was a great conversation with him, and I can't be more grateful for him taking the time. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, in fact, I think that one took a few months for us to line it up.
It did. God, we worked on it from like November to, I don't know, the first of the year, if I remember right. Pretty close. Yeah. And I mean, it took a couple months to line up, but it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, totally. So up next we have Eric Merrill. If you didn't listen to this episode the first time, Eric is an engineering manager at Workfront, and what that means is he is the boss of a group of web developers, and he's also a really good friend of mine. We go way back, middle school years, and he's been an amazing friend and not only a good resource for me because like earlier today I texted him. I'm like, hey, you got 10 minutes? He sat down, kids going crazy around him. I was like, yeah, what's up? And we did a quick screen share, and I showed him some code I was working on, and he was able to help me kind of fix a bug. And just really nice to have that resource.
Yeah, really cool. Well, and he was kind enough to open up his house to us, which was really cool. We basically showed up at his place in the middle of the night after the kids had gone to bed and everything. And I felt like we got a lot of really cool information that wasn't just really for designers. It was really more about from like maybe the perspective of a manager, somebody who's managing and working with people. And I think there were a lot of little nuggets in there that folks could really take and run with, in their own careers and things. So I think it's well worth a listen.
Yeah. And even just, I think at one point we were talking about workflow and how it works on, with their company versus your company, and you just bouncing ideas back and forth. I think it was kind of cool to,
it was
me
really
as an outsider that doesn't really work in these systems to sit down. Oh, so that's how they, okay. So it was kind of neat for me just to hear you guys talk.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, folks might see on the album artwork engineering manager or something and be like, yeah, it's not for me. But really the conversation was much more business centric and management centric. And I thought it was very insightful. So I would definitely encourage you to go back and listen to the whole album or the whole show.
Yep. Do that. But without further ado, here's Eric.
Eric, I don't know exactly how old you are, but if you're, a similar age with Mike, we're sort of all, contemporaries.
Like 6 months apart. Yeah.
So I was just curious if you had sort of the same experience I did. So growing up, basically, the internet came to be in our lifetime versus these young kids that are being born into it. Did you find that, were you drawn to the internet early on? Meaning, people were building websites and you wanted to get into it. So were you doing a lot of self-teaching? Because nowadays you've got things like Pluralsight and different places where you can go and you can learn just about anything you want and it's really available. But I know for me, when I was younger and I wanted to build my first website, for example, I couldn't just go to Squarespace and build a website. I had to build a website. And so I was forced to sort of learn programming, or at least some, to some extent in order to do that.
One of the first sites you built was one of mine.
Yeah, one of the early DJ sites.
Dreamweaver, I think.
Yeah, in Dreamweaver, in just straight HTML with some big nasty JPEG images and stuff.
The very front page was a giant JPEG.
Little hotspots everywhere.
Hotspot on the left and right if you were school or a wedding person. Yeah. I remember that. That was
but I just wondered if you sort of, because of, or if you had any perspective on growing up with it, if you noticed that it helped you, I guess, now in your career or put you somehow ahead because of having to really dig your way through the trenches, while things were being developed.
No, probably not. It didn't influence me too much just because I hadn't decided I'd wanted to go into programming yet. So by the time I did want to go into programming, I was halfway through college and we had high-speed internet and I had my college courses to focus on. But what you're saying now is so true. It's just growing more and more where we have people come and apply for software engineering jobs that didn't do the formal schooling. And, at first they might struggle a little bit because of, just lacking some of the concepts for programming. But within 6 months to a year, they're just pretty caught up to people who spend 4 years in college. So it's definitely changing.
Well, then on that, because I've asked this question in the last couple of podcasts and it's quickly becoming a recurring theme for me. What is your perspective, especially now as a manager and as somebody who's doing the hiring and we won't get into, but the firing, do you have a perspective or a stance on formal education versus non-formal in terms of the people who come to work for you and things like that? Are you finding people who have maybe been self-taught or worked their way, through different platforms on their own? Are they every bit as good, not as good? Are you finding better quality candidates straight out of university versus people who've come up, through a non-traditional path?
Well, part of why he says that is because a lot of the illustrators he gets or designers from BYU Ad Lab or whatever, they'll come out and they have the same portfolio, the same product that everyone else has, and it's kind of sifting through the weeds. Whereas, I think a lot of the developers and the people coming up, taking like Treehouse or lynda.com approach or all this stuff, for me, trying to learn it, I had no clue what to learn. And that was the biggest problem, because I would focus on one language and find out it's obsolete, or focus on something that doesn't even matter anymore. So I guess I would think that going through college and going through a structured program like that, they would be on top of, what technology to learn or what software to learn, versus someone that, is self-taught.
Trying to figure it out on their own.
Yeah. I think there's some of that for sure. Like, I think it depends on each individual's personality. If you're the kind of person that can spend that extra time knowing what you need to learn, and you've got that self-motivation, then I don't know that college is necessary for the vast majority of programming jobs out there. You can just go learn it. I mean, there's, like you said, there's tons of online learning programs that you can come up to speed on programming. But what I would say is that some of the concepts they teach you in computer science programs, you're not just going to run into on your day-to-day jobs, but occasionally for some of the harder problems, it's going to come in really beneficial. So it's like, as somebody involved in the hiring process, I would just want to make sure that I have people on my team that are both, have that more computer science background, as well as just, code monkeys, people who have come out of some of the boot camps or whatnot. That's fine. Or once you've got 2 years of experience, it's just like, again, it doesn't really matter what education you've got. We're not looking on your resume and saying, did you get a bachelor's degree? Or did you get a master's degree? It just doesn't matter. It's experience.
Well, and that's what I guess I'm trying to figure out, is I'm talking to different people from different disciplines. Our guest last week, Dylan Mangus, was a really qualified, really high level, creative director, art guy. And so he offered some unique perspective on this, as well as some other people we've talked to in the past. And I guess that's what I'm trying to establish, is it seems like there's maybe the way that we do formal education in this country might be evolving. And so I'm just trying to kind of get a pulse, for people, especially folks in hiring positions, to see what they think about the importance of that. Not to say, kids don't go to school or whatever, obviously you need to chase down and get whatever training you can. And not everybody's going to be self-disciplined enough to do it on their own. It certainly requires an extra degree of oomph that not everybody's got. But anyway, I think it's interesting to get other people's perspectives. I know in my industry, for example, in advertising and marketing, your book or your portfolio, can go a long way towards work versus, maybe you got that big fancy degree, but if you've got the same portfolio that everyone else does, I can't tell that you're any better than anyone else.
Yeah, and we've definitely got that equivalent in the programming world with GitHub. If you don't have the experience, then you probably ought to have a GitHub link attached to your resume or application, so we can go see what work you've done, what side projects you've worked on that will demonstrate that real world experience that we're looking for.
So can you break down your hiring process at Workfront? Like, say I wanted to go and apply for a job there, what would you guys put me through to even become qualified for an interview?
It's going to depend on a little bit on what level you have and what role you're going for, but generally it's you submit us your resume. There's going to be a panel of people who review the resume. We're going to be looking for keywords. So it's like, the whole idea of
coder
gaming the system really works, at least as far as getting you through to the interview. And once, we say, yeah, that resume looks good, he's got what we're looking for, you'll be sent some sort of take-home coding challenge test that will give you the ability to demonstrate your coding finesse, and then you'll send it back to us, and we'll again make a judgment based on how elegant the code is, whether it solved the problems, and typically we'll have tests associated with that. Did it make the test pass? So is it actually functional? And then if we like it, then we'll bring you in for an on-site where we do more like a cultural fit interview, and again, just a kind of a double take on the technical expertise to make sure that you weren't just using Google and you got it because you're good at Googling versus actually having that knowledge hands-on. Not that that's bad. I mean, in my field, that's what you do. You Google all day long.
Somebody else has already solved the problem.
Internet goes down and we're all, what do we do? Can't access the API docs. What, Stack Overflow? I can't get to it? Who's going to solve my problem for me?
No joke, right?
So I have to know, in the cultural sit down, do you guys sit in a black room lit only by monitors? Do you simulate mom's basement or anything like that?
No.
Or has the developer of the past become a little more modern? They're not afraid of the light anymore?
You've still got a mix. You've got the typical antisocial programmer that doesn't want anything to do with people, and then you've got the new programmer. So no, it's a mix. Silicon Valley. You guys watch that show? That kind of mentality. Hey, we're cool. We code, but we're still cool.
So I saw like 1 or 2 episodes of that, and I think I made a note to go and check it out, and never did. So I kind of want to go and
it's
just
pretty.
have a
It's pretty
weekend.
great. It's worth watching.
I think you showed me the first episode. I think it was at your house. But so let's step back a little bit and go back over the last, I don't know, how you've been doing this out of school for like 10 years now?
Yeah, 10 plus years.
10 plus years. So when you first got out, I mean, technology has come a long way since then. And I can imagine just staying relevant in this industry is pretty tough. Can you go over like how much you have to study every week or month or whatever just to stay in the know and be able to, be relevant?
Yeah. So again, there's going to be a divide depending on what technology stack you're working on. Like if you think of back-end programmers, your typical enterprise working in Java or .NET, that stuff just doesn't change as rapidly as front-end tech. So you don't have to spend as much time keeping your skills sharp, and your years of experience is going to matter a lot more for employers. But when you start going into the front-end development, that's where my expertise lies. Suddenly it's like, hey, you can't have 5 years of experience on any given framework because there's a new framework every 6 months, and it's like, all right, you have as much experience as that college grad, so it's a lot harder. You're constantly having to learn new things. It's one of the struggles that I have, and one of the reasons that I wanted to go to the management route was I kind of feel like as I've gotten older, I don't have that time and that passion that I used to have to continually be learning those new technologies in the depth that you need to succeed in the industry.
Yeah.
So in your path, or with people you've worked with, or as you've worked your way up into management, have you found, or do you think as far as a programmer, maybe somebody coming up in the business or who's looking for work, do you find a lot of specialists or a lot of generalists? Like, do you get your just Java guy, or do you need somebody that can cover 3 or 4 different languages or 3 or 4 different technologies? Or do you have a preference, I should say? Is there maybe one way that's better than another?
Again, it's going to depend on the level of the person. It's like if you're entry level, you're going to be expected to know one language. But as you get into that senior level, it's expected that it doesn't matter what language you've programmed in. You should be able to come up to speed within 6 weeks on any language. So if you've done .NET and we're a Java shop, fine. As long as you know the basic programming concepts, you should be able to pick up a new language pretty quick.
That's one thing that I kind of figured out just through trial and error, because when I first started working on this project that I'm doing, I started studying Bootstrap, and I didn't realize that Bootstrap was just layout. It was just, scalability and functionality, nothing to do with the actual programming part of it. It was more just design side. And then I realized, it's not that simple. Now I got to learn a language now, and I studied PHP, and PHP, come to find out, was obsolete. And then I thought the next thing I needed to learn was Ruby on Rails, because when I sat down with you at the time, that was the one to know, right? And what was it, like 4 years ago, we sat down and had lunch, and I would go the Ruby on Rails kind of thing, and I was like, okay. So I kind of did a little bit of research on that, not enough. I didn't go deep into it because there's only so much you can learn on your own. And then I come to find out that JavaScript's the way to go, and now there's React and Node.js and all this other stuff, and it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it is, even for somebody in the industry.
Yeah, and for me, it was downright depressing, to be honest with you.
Sorry about that.
Well, no, I mean, it's my own doing, not to get off on another project, but we did a project for a friend of mine that he had a WordPress site, and it was functioning, and it was doing the job that it needed to be done. And I had another guy that was a developer, but he just did PHP. And I had no clue how much of a nightmare or a pain in the butt this was going to be, just because lack of knowledge, I didn't realize that,
all the user information is in a database inside the WordPress plugin, and accessing it and pulling it out and doing all this other stuff. I think I ended up going through and there were 15,000 entries in a database I had to update manually just to make it work, and that took about 6 months of time just to do. But it ended up, the site's up and live now, but I would have never even got my feet into that mess if I would have known how much effort that took. And I think we mentioned it before when I came to you to say, hey, I got this idea, let's build this site. You're like, I'm good. And I learned a lot just out of that interaction, just because you knew how much of a pain in the butt it was going to be, and you knew how much work would be involved. And you said up front, nope, I'm good. Whereas me, not knowing, I'm like, yeah, we can do this. And then we'll jump in and realize, oh man, I just screwed myself. And, I think that just through that process of, trying to get my idea off the ground, and the last 3 years of my life, I have grown tremendously just in my thought process, my level of, willingness to say no to people. Because before I'd be like, yeah, I can throw out a quick WordPress site for you, and yeah, I can do this. And it really, I'm okay with telling people no now.
Yeah, you're a jerk, Mike.
No, and the fact that you're actually working with me and taking time out of the limited time you have with your family as is, and just spending, 3 hours here and there or whatever, even if I have a question, like seriously, I'll feel bad even emailing you a question sometimes, just because I'm like,
you should feel bad. Eric was telling me earlier, this is becoming a problem.
This jerk.
So, hey, so in a related question, and maybe there's not even a clear answer to this, but let's say I'm, 14-year-old computer nerd. I love my iPhone. I'm thinking about what to do for a career, stuff like that. And to Mike's point, if you just sit down and you try and say, I want to get into computer programming, that can mean a million things to a million people. And depending on your position, your technologies and things like that might vary. Can you think of, or could you recommend a place to start for somebody who might be interested in going down this path? In terms of, are there some sort of fundamental languages they ought to have a good handle on before they really specialize? Or, is there some core learnings that they ought to have in place before they really get into trying to do this as a profession?
Yeah, the thing about it is, if you're going to stick with anything, you've got to love what you're doing. So it's like, what would be the reason they'd want to get into programming? Are they into gaming? Because they've got awesome tools that, for Minecraft, where they use Minecraft as a tool to teach people programming, making mods and things like that. There's lots of stuff out there. If they want to do web, then it's about, hey, what do I need to do to get my own website up so that people can look at it? It's just wherever your passion lies, there's going to be a way to apply programming to it. And it's, becoming so commonplace that they're having programming classes in elementary school now.
Well, your kids are doing JavaScript.
Yeah, my kids have been learning Scratch, I think is the website they use, but it's basically teaching Java.
Yeah, is that a drag and drop?
Yeah, they drag and drop the little pieces of code and build scripts to execute different things. They build little games.
I'm doing it all wrong. I need to do the drag.
Yeah, go back to Scratch. That's the one. But okay, well, cool. Well, that's really interesting.
Well, and on that note, last week I went to a meetup. I've never gone to one of those before, and it's actually kind of unique. It's kind of cool. Just meetup.com, and if you're into photography, if you want to go on runs with people who like running, there are different activities that you can go to, and one of them that I went to last week was just a JavaScript fundamentals, and then there was more advanced class right after it. So I stuck around and sat through the advanced class, and this guy was a game developer. And he literally, in the amount of time that we were there, he had 45 minutes, and he sat down and he built it was kind of like a Pac-Man game in 45 minutes. It wasn't like completely functional, but, we were throwing out suggestions, and it was like a hybrid of Pac-Man and Minecraft, where if you hit a certain dot, you lost life, and if you hit another dot, you gain life. And just watching him be able to type this complex CSS and JavaScript and everything to get what he wanted on the screen and get the movement and action out of it, just out of his head, it boggled my mind. I was like, how does he even remember all this? How does he know all this? And, it probably just comes down to the fact that he does it for 8 hours a day, and it's just, second nature to him now.
Yeah, there's also the 80-20 principle plays really heavy in programming. You can get 80% of that functionality in 20% of the time, and then the rest of it is just things you don't think about, like error checking or whatever. It's I think it hides some of the complexities of programming and why it's so difficult is we can make it look very functional really quick. Prototyping is a thing. So,
so how long do you think it took for you to get comfortable to the point where, you didn't second guess everything you did? Because that's what I'm doing right now. The project, we're building components in my project right now, and we're working with MongoDB and some other stuff, and I've been kind of studying that, and now I can kind of look at it and replicate it, but I can't just write it from scratch. Was there just a defining moment where you're like, oh, I got this, and you can just kind of do your thing, or is it still have issues with it?
If you're just talking about in general, when did programming click for me? I'd say it's probably a year and a half into my first real world job where I was finally like, hey, this isn't so hard. And the pattern kind of has followed suit pretty much 6 months into a job before I'm fully comfortable with the technology stack and feel like, okay, I'm back up to where I was in my previous company, and I've got the domain knowledge down, and I understand the way that they do the programming here because that's going to be different on every team and in every company.
So just even changing a job, for example, you might have to learn a whole new language based on what they've built in the past and what they're working with, or...
You might have to learn a new language, but even if you don't, they're likely going to be using different libraries, different aspects of the tech stack that you're going to have to become familiar with.
Yeah, so different functions that were written, and you have to kind of get familiar with that.
Yeah, and you just go back to the idea of coding as creative. It's like you get 5 programmers in the room to come up with a solution. You're gonna have 5 different solutions because there's no one way to do it, and there's not even a right way to do it. There's just different ways to do it, and there's going to be trade-offs, pros and cons.
The end result is what you're going for, and the 5 people kind of have to communicate on the best way to come up with the example.
Yeah, and if you take a group of people that are in a company for a while, they're going to start to align in the way they do things. So when you come in from the outside, you're going to have to learn how they do things, and again, there's going to be conformity that you have to have in order to just maintain that. Hey, we can get things done without having that contention all the time about what's the right way to do it.
So you mentioned it took like a year and a half before it sort of clicked, and you felt like you were fully competent in what you were doing. Can you talk about maybe how you got your first gig? Like, your first actual programming job. I don't mean like, working at Jack in the Box or something, but
it was Burger King.
That's true.
But your first like real programming gig, like your first, right out of college or whatever, and you step into a position where maybe you don't know it all. How did you get to, I guess, how did you handle that interview? How did you, make that next step? I know for a lot of people, if you were trying to become a web programmer, it might be difficult to pick the right position or something like that. So I wondered if you could share any advice about getting that first job, because it seems like maybe once you're in, you've got some time to really learn, either your language or the needs of that particular company. Your skills get up to a certain level. You can learn new languages really quick. But how do you do that first one?
Yeah, that first one is so hard. I mean, there's so many companies that will reject you just based on, hey, he doesn't have the minimum 2 years experience. So really, it's hard. And I'm not sure that I did it the best way, but I did shotgun approach. I just applied a lot of places, and I think I ended up with about 3 offers by the time I probably applied at 15 different companies. And I don't know. I think that it's looking for a company that's willing to take a risk on you. So whereas I got a job in a small company, oftentimes a bigger company, it's easier to get your foot in the door as a new developer.
Just because they have more jobs to go around.
They have more jobs. They've got more resources.
They don't need you to wear quite as many hats and that kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to that end, do you prefer as a programmer working on a team of developers where you do just wear your singular hat maybe, or maybe 2 or 3 instead of 20 hats, or do you like to work on a team? Like, do you prefer the team environment versus the individual environment, or the pros and cons to each?
I don't know that there is a such thing as individual in programming. I know there's that stereotype again because you get all the antisocial programmers, but in reality, we work on teams. There's just the idea that you can just be an awesome programmer and just get stuff done and not interact with others, such as UX and designers and program managers and quality assurance. It's not feasible. Unless you're at a really, really small company and then you've got that startup mentality where you really are the only developer. It just doesn't happen. I think that there would be advantages to that. If you start really small, then of course you don't have somebody that can go and you can't go ask questions to somebody. You've got to figure it out yourself. You can Google it, but sometimes you're dealing with
problem solving on your own.
Yeah. Whereas if you find yourself in a big company, there's going to be somebody who has the answers. So you're going to be able to use that as a crutch. You won't probably grow as fast.
Interesting. Are there any industry sites or blogs that you read regularly, or conferences you might go to stay current?
I've tried that whole thing, and I do subscribe with RSS, don't judge, to various like JavaScript Ninja, and I don't even know what they are because I subscribed so long ago. I just get them in my feed, but honestly, I just don't get a whole lot out of that. More, it's like it might come across with some new buzzword, and I'll go, what is that? And go Google it. I do have a Pluralsight subscription, so I'll occasionally do courses on there. But no, it's mostly, what's the latest hot thing that people are talking about? Conferences, I do tend to go to one conference a year. And again, I think that's just a way of saying, what is the industry doing? Where are people focusing their energies? Therefore, where should I focus my energies? What should I learn next, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but so you began life as a programmer, but now you've moved into management role. And things have changed a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you. So one of the things that sort of went around, and I think it's very common in development, but I've seen agencies try and fail to implement it, is a style of project management or called Agile. Do you guys use Agile or Waterfall, or do you have a preference of different management styles for managing these big projects? And the reason I ask is because I know that in an agency environment, we've tried to implement this for digital projects and things like that. And I don't know if we're failing because we don't have the expertise with Agile within an agency, just because it's not normally how agencies operate. But as agencies are becoming more and more digital, and they're having to try and compete with digital only shops, they're trying to sort of glom technologies and project management ideas and things like that from these digital firms. Can you speak at all to how you guys manage project management? What systems you guys use, any of that kind of stuff?
Sure. At Workfront, we do Waterfile. It's we're supposed to be agile, right? We even made it our focus for a while to target marketers and ad agencies that would need to, move their work over to digital space and start to adopt this agile methodology. So our product supports agile very well. But the problem is I haven't seen a lot of places that actually do agile 100%.
Can you break down agile for me, because I have no clue?
Oh, absolutely. That's a good idea.
That's actually probably a better place to start.
So, if you think traditional software development, the waterfall is the idea that, hey, we're going to set up this whole contract, and this is the feature list that needs to be done by this time frame. So everything is contract based, and whether or not something goes in is whether it was in the initial contract, and it doesn't change once development starts. Whereas Agile tries to say, okay, we're gonna go through these small chunks of time and just iterate on it and try to figure out that what we're doing is actually what the customer is going to want. So the customer gets involved a lot in that process, and whether that customer is external or internal, it doesn't really matter. It's just the idea that we're going to be able to customize our workflow and what we're going to finally deliver based on the customer's needs. So it just makes it's a win-win, right? We're not wasting our time developing software that nobody wants, and the customer's going to get what they want because they're able to make changes throughout the process.
Have you found that as I know that I'm guilty of having worked with another guy on another project of saying, hey, we can do this, when really he didn't structure it to begin with in the first place, and now he has to go back and make a lot of revisions because it wasn't set up for that initially. Has that been a problem being, agile versus, is it waterfall?
Well, there's more. I mean, those are two methodologies. It's just, you think waterfall versus agile, old school versus new school.
Yeah, those are sort of the buzzy ones.
Yeah, and there's different types of agile. I mean, at my company, we do Scrum, we do Kanban, different ways of doing it. But in the end, I say there is no truly agile, because you think agile is more like an ideology. It's this is our goal. We want to develop in this way. But then the business gets involved, and you need to make money, and so product comes in and says, hey, we need these features in order to sell the product. Oh, and we need it before our competitor gets it, and we know that they're going to have it out in 1 year. So can we get this feature set done in 1 year? Sure, we'll do that agile but really we've been told what we need to work on and what we need to get done. So it's not really agile.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong too. So one of the sort of the things in agile is you work in these sprints, right? Where you sort of take a great big project and break it into little pieces versus, trying to eat a whole watermelon, you're cutting it into slices first.
Right.
And so, and I think that is sort of the difference with the water or the agile approach versus a waterfall approach.
Right.
And so anyway, just to sort of clarify that a little bit, they get into these scrums, which are their little meetings or get-togethers, and then they sort of break it into these different projects. And I don't know each of the categories, but there's sort of a beginning stage, and then an in-process stage, and a ready-for-checkup stage, and stuff like that. And that's sort of how they work through the process of each.
Say you
component.
get a project from in your design firm or whatever. I'm wondering if the steps are similar between building software or building an ad campaign or
Yeah, I think they are to some degree. I think, which is why agency is trying to start adopting those processes. It's just it's a different world. At least with a lot of the agencies I've worked with that haven't begun life as being particularly digitally savvy. It's not a methodology they're used to. It's sort of a new wave thing, and agencies sort of stick to doing things the way they always have. So until they bring in digital experts or folks that have worked, in digital firms or for software companies or whatever, you don't really learn about that. So for example, with one of the firm I consult with, they had one guy who was sort of an expert in agile. So he was trying to roll that out to everybody, but nobody else is an expert on it. So it just never really caught, but it really has to be sort of cultural. You have to come into it and everybody has to buy into that methodology, and then you all have to sort of use it, and having one expert sort of trying to lead from the top down wasn't very effective.
Interesting. Being an outsider looking in, it's kind of, I find it, intriguing, just the steps and the process that, an industry would go through just to come up with the end result, because you have so many hats. You have, the sales guy versus the guy doing the actual work versus, the management. And I mean, I guess on that note, what changes have you noticed going from a programmer to like a management role? How has that changed your day-to-day life?
Well, I code less. I probably spend 40 to 50% of my time coding. And then the rest of it is a split between people management and project management.
Okay.
Well, and so with that, from, I guess, working on a team where you're not necessarily managing people, you're all sort of managing one project, to now where you're in charge and you're managing a team. Have you felt a shift in the dynamic or in the way that you work with everybody, or have you run into? I know a lot of people run into issues when they sort of advance, that those kind of left behind maybe either resent or have a problem with whoever's moved forward, because now, hey, you were the guy that we were in the trenches with, and now you're telling me what to do. Have you run into any kind of problems like that, or?
Not problems, but definitely there have been changes in the relationship, but that's, to be expected. I've definitely noticed a different way that people talk to me and the way that they don't talk to me. It's like, hey, this guy has power over raises and he can fire me. I don't know. Just the role power definitely changes the dynamic of our relationship.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, it's sort of a gut thing, but how do you like it? Do you prefer this? Was this where you wanted to end up, or do you prefer to be in the trenches?
It depends on the day that you ask me. I enjoy the ability that I have to have a greater influence in the company and have a greater impact in the lives of the people that I work with. But at the same time, I bear a lot of the stress and responsibility for that. And sometimes I have to do things that are unpleasant, such as, let people go. And that's uncomfortable for me. It's not what I want. I just want to be everybody's friend.
Dude, I avoid confrontation like the plague.
Well, I would say, honestly, if you enjoy firing people, I think you're also, there's other problems that you need to discuss. So I think, of course, anytime you're messing with somebody's livelihood, that's a difficult choice. Even if it was brought on by the offender, it's still never easy.
All right, next on the block we have DJ Dirty Dave. A couple months back, we had a fella named Jesse Medelis on the show. Latin hip hop artist, and he was coming to Salt Lake City to do his debut concert. Well, the promoter of the debut concert was DJ Dirty Dave, and we had an opportunity to sit down with him here in Salt Lake just before the Jesse Medelis event, an event called Mi Cielo that DJ Dirty Dave hosts every so often over at Sky in Salt Lake City. And we had a really cool conversation with him just about, DJ life, the music business. His backstory was really interesting.
Yeah, his first show, talking about the pitfalls and, whatever, and then coming out and working his way up to Sky Nightclub.
Yeah, and just sort of, the back or the things that go into putting on an event like his Mi Cielo event and other things like that. And I felt like there was a lot of good little nuggets in there that people could use, whether they're hosting their own event or whether they're trying to work their way up in a career. I felt like there were some good stories of grit and discipline and hard work in there that I think could be really applicable to anybody listening. So I think it's really worth taking a listen to.
Yeah, he's. I think he's starting a new monthly hip hop night at Sky.
Yeah, I believe, and I think they just did their first one on March 30th or something, just at the end of March. But it's called TGIF at Sky Nightclub in Salt Lake. I guess it's going to be a monthly hip-hop event. We'll have to learn a little bit more from Dave himself, maybe have him circle back around and fill us in. Yeah. But he's got that, and then he's also got his Mi Cielo events. I don't know how often they run, really, maybe quarterly or
I think
something.
They do them every month. I've seen.
Is it every month also?
Yeah.
I mean, he does quite a few of them, so it's possible it's every month. He also just dropped a track. Dirty Dave is also a producer and a DJ, and so he produced a track with DJ Drew live at the most recent Mi Cielo event on April 6th, and really cool, worth taking a listen to. So do check him out. His Instagram info and everything is in the show notes. And take a listen. Here he is.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. You work with a radio station. You kind of fell into Latin music versus...
Yeah, it's a funny story. So, I mean, growing up, I started DJing, roughly in high school.
Doing house parties kind of thing?
Doing house parties, stuff like that. I used to be pretty good at basketball. That's what I used to do with my life, is just play basketball. But, something happened to my dad, and I had to, take care of the family. So I got a job, and I kind of quit my career in basketball for a bit. And, just music was always been a big part of my life. So that's how I kind of got into DJing. Got into my first job, and my homie that I met over there introduced me to Virtual DJ, which is one of my favorite programs.
I think pretty much every DJ in the industry goes through the Virtual DJ phase.
Yeah, the Virtual DJ phase. I mean, it's not a bad program.
No, it's great. It's I've never used it in a mixing environment, so I never got to actually mess around with it as far as trying to blend music together. When I used it, I literally just created a playlist and hit play and walked away kind of thing.
Hey, it works, right? Whatever works. But to touch base on that, that's how I started. And, long story short, a couple of years passed by, I bettered my craft and stuff like that. And I'm here today throwing shows at Sky SLC with my business partner, Alden and David Rolas. And we're trying to bring a different environment here to Salt Lake City, which has never seen before.
So expound on that, like by different environment that they've never seen before. Is it just a Latin kind of party, or is it just, what's different about it?
So for people who don't know Sky SLC, which is probably the majority of our listening audience, Sky is it's a local nightclub here in Salt Lake, but they're
one
sort
of the bigger ones.
Yeah,
in
it's
Salt
maybe
Lake.
the biggest.
Yeah.
I don't
know. The Vegas style venue, LED screens.
Yeah, it's cool. I saw Will Sparks there, and some other EDM type guys, but that's sort of been their bread and butter, right? There's a lot of EDM,
and stuff like that. So me and my partner Alden, I used to DJ Elevate, and I got into some trouble with the promoter over there. He doesn't really like me, but it's all good. All love.
That's the business.
That's the business. So
gotta have a couple
instead of burning a bridge, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and try something out. So we reached out to the guys at Sky, because I DJ'd there before EDM on their Saturdays and stuff like that. So they gave us an opportunity to do a Latin night there. And from there on it's history, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and it's funny because a lot of people may not think of Salt Lake City as being like overly Latin. I think a lot of people's opinion of Salt Lake is that it might be among the whitest cities around. But there's actually a pretty heavy Latino contingent here. There's
very diverse.
A lot of
very
Hispanic
diverse
people, South Americans especially, living here in Salt Lake. And so it's interesting because before meeting Dave, we did an event at a venue down here too. And he said that the Latin night was his bread and butter. He's like, that's where, the people come out to dance at a Latin night, And so it's really cool that Sky has opened up their mind, I guess, a little bit and is trying out this Latin night.
Is this one of the first ones you've done at Sky, or is this kind of, third, fourth, you've done it before?
So I've been doing Mi Cielo, which is the Latin night that we do here at Sky.
So what does Mi Cielo mean?
My Sky.
My Sky, okay.
Yep, that's what it means. Right. So it was pretty good.
I'm not the Spanish guy. We got everyone else here that does that. I'm just here.
No, so our first show that we did was back in, I think it was May 26th.
Okay.
And ever since then, we've just been doing it once a month.
How was the first show?
The first show was really good. Really good. We had about 800, 900 people for the first show. So
that's not bad for
a first
show.
time for a show.
Great.
I think it was incredible.
Well, and how does the format work? So you bring in like a guest DJ, sort of a personality. In the case of the one this week, we've got Jesse Medeles, but I think both you're performing, and I think there's one other DJ on the bill, right?
Yeah. So there's one of my homies from a long time ago. He started DJing out with me. His name's DJ Jerry. He'll be opening up the night for us.
Nice.
And then I also have my good friend Nai, which will be performing as well. He's he's a winner of a kind of like American Idol back in, I believe it was in Venezuela or something like that. So,
cool.
So it's really good to have him on board.
Also, just FYI, we have Borja in the house. What's up, Borja? You haven't said a single word yet.
Yeah, I know. I
just didn't want you piping in like 20 minutes from here and having the fourth voice, like scaring people.
Yeah, so anybody who's missed the Borja factor since before Christmas, he's back in the house.
Yep.
So, all right. So, Dave, you sort of touched on it a little bit, but how did you make that transition from... Well, I guess really get into the music business, right? So, there's being a music fan, but then moving into radio, working as a DJ, and promoting. Really each one's sort of unique and distinct. And Mike and I actually have a lot of experience in the promotion world, but and he obviously has experience in the DJ world. But how did you, I guess, go from just doing it for fun to making it a business? Like, how did you make that step?
So, we're young. We're out here trying to get money. You know what I mean? As a young person, you want to do something big. So, me and my best friend, he always believed in me in the DJing aspect, and we would throw little shows here and there at the Murray Theater and little high school shows, little parties and stuff like that. And, it just kind of got bigger from there, we kept doing that. I kept doing shows for free, stuff like that. And then we actually started getting paid. So we started doing bigger shows. In that aspect, we helped promote, an EDM show where I got to open up for a headliner.
Oh, cool.
And, ever since then, we've just been working hard to actually make this dream happen. We don't own a venue, you have to rent it out. So you have to pay for it. But, it's easy if you just put your mind to it and you just be consistent with it, so.
Yeah, I think consistency is definitely key. It's much harder to come in out of the blue and do something the first time. And once you do kind of have that first show under your belt and you got the reputation going, it's easier to kind of, snowball downhill and keep it going and
exactly.
make it bigger.
It's always nerve-wracking, believe me. Every time I have a show, like I always get the butterflies. Like the first time, every time I get on the stage and I'm about to DJ, like they all just go away.
Yep.
I don't know why, but that's just how it is.
Usually for me, like if I'm in an environment where I'm kind of on a stage, like I'm actually like not hidden in the corner, just playing background music or whatever, and I'm actually performing for people, my hands shake and I get all jittery and stuff before I go on, and then once I'm on, it all goes away. It's like
I don't know. It's
weird.
It's just what it is.
Well, and from the production angle, obviously, I'm not doing a lot of entertaining for people, but I mean, both Mike and I were concert promoters for a number of years. And, you know, I mean, that feeling of just sort of, God, is anybody going to come to this thing?
Exactly.
Oh, man, people aren't coming through the door fast enough. How are we going to pay this guy?
It's not even 9 o'clock yet, and you're sweating bullets thinking, like, we're not going to sell out.
And just to touch base on that, I mean, I don't know if you know, but Latin people are always late to everything.
Everything. I know that from my experience with the Spanish people.
So, I mean, you know, the first shows that we ever did at Sky, like, it'd be like 10:30, and like, dude, there's no one here. There's like 20 people here.
11:30, it's cracking.
11:30, it's cracking. You know what I
mean? That's awesome. But yeah, no, I can definitely relate to those jitters.
So tell me about your very first show. Like, you know, I made some blunders definitely on the first few that I did, and as far as like over, you know, budgeting more than I should for certain things and not doing certain things. And tell me about, you know, like, the thought of doing the first show, the actual making it happen, the promotion side of it, as far as like how long did you go out flyering cars? You just hit up your friends? Like what, just break down your very first show for me.
So the first show was at the Murray Theater. I had a chance to rock with DJ DiMaggio and DJ Jello, which are pretty well-known DJs here, and they're really good. But anyways, it was my first show. I just barely got my first DJ set like maybe a month ago, which was the NS7.
Yeah.
So I really wasn't too good, but I've always had a good music selection. I can tell you that. If we ever going on a trip,
playlist was always on
if we're ever going on a trip, let me be that guy. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the first show, I was really, 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 really nervous. Like, bro, you don't understand. Yeah. Butterflies, like we had a good amount of people there. We had like 400 or 500 people in there. You know, it's a high school dance party. I mean,
so it was 18 and up kind of deal.
I think it was 15. Okay, 15 to 18-year-olds. So
I ran into an issue doing one of those shows once where I promoted it for 3 months. Showed up the night of the event or the day before the event. I got an email from the prosecuting attorney from the city of Everett saying, if you do this show, you're going to be charged with a misdemeanor and yada, yada, yada. And I had to cancel it day of. Wow. I literally sat in the parking lot telling people to leave. It's pretty bad. But yeah, so Murray Theater, is it just a venue you can rent out and you got to bring speakers in and stuff like that? Or
yeah, so I mean, we know a guy. He does sound. He's a really good DJ as well. So he gives us a good price. So that's what we went with. He sets it all up with his sons and stuff like that. So first show, I was nervous. But I've always had the support from my family. That's first and foremost, you know, especially my mom. Like, she's always believed in me. So, you know, even though I was nervous and I did bad, you know, comparing to what I am now, like, or how I...
Well, you always look back on previous...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I thought it was an accomplishment. You know, I didn't lose my cool or anything, but you know, I just did what I had to do, and I did it, and I did it well.
It's funny because you don't realize it in that moment, but I mean, you know, it's that old cliche, right? That every little step is leading towards something bigger.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you didn't recognize that maybe as a baby step at the time, but you know, depending on how it went, but I mean, the failure, the success, the whatever you pull out of that first event, it gives you the energy for the next.
Exactly. Yes.
And then you end up on the radio and all that other stuff down the road. And so, but that's what it requires, is taking those baby steps first.
Exactly. And you know, times have changed. You know, a lot of the promoting with the flyers doesn't really work.
Nope, not at all.
So I think it's kind of a waste of money. Everything's, you know, social media based nowadays.
What do you base most of your draw from? Facebook,
Instagram, word of mouth. Okay. We also use, you know, obviously the venues, websites, and their social media as well. That's definitely a bigger push for us as well.
Yeah, well, and then working for the radio station, do they get behind you with this kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I still got to pay for my own ads.
Sure.
But they give me a great rate. And, you know, sometimes you do got to spend a little money just to get your reach out to people that, you know, maybe not know what's going on that Friday. You know what I mean? So.
Well, yeah, and you know, it's a competitive market too, especially here in Salt Lake. I mean, there's always stuff going on, you know, and so it's hard to stand out in the crowd. So it's really important to do that extra marketing and advertising, either on the radio or wherever. But back to sort of what we introed with. Last week we had Jesse Medelis on the show, and we got your name from him. But how do you know him? How'd that relationship come about?
So I met Jesse through David Rolas. So, you know, working for the radio, you know, you meet people.
Sure.
So I guess him and David have this producer. His name is Al Cover of ANX. I don't know if you guys know who ANX is. Mm-hmm. But they're Don Omar's producers, so I guess they were working.
I was wondering if that was the guy, because we did a little bit of research on him last week, and we did know that he worked with one of the guys that worked with Don Omar, and I was wondering if that was him.
Yeah, correct. So that's ANX. Alcover, he's pursuing his own independent artist career as well. But that's how I met him. This through David. I guess they were working on a project together, and I met Jesse through the phone. We were chopping it up. He seemed really cool.
Yeah, it seems really down to earth.
Sent me some of his music, and I was just blown away. And ever since then, we've been really cool. I always play his music in the mix, whenever I'm out in the club.
Ah, killer. So now this coming event, Mi Cielo, which one is this? Is this 2 or 3 that you've done already?
This is going to be, I believe, number 9.
Oh, wow.
So this has been going on for a while.
8 or 9.
Is it a monthly thing or
it's bi-weekly? It's a monthly thing, yeah. So, I mean, if you guys don't mind, I can kind of go over the lineup of the artists that we've had.
Tell us about the event.
So let me tell you about the first show. The first show didn't go as planned. Actually, the headliner that was supposed to come due to weather problems didn't make it.
Oh,
so unfortunately, our first show was kind of a fluke. But we bounced back. DJ Nelson was supposed to be here. I don't know if you guys know who DJ Nelson is.
I know him.
Well, he's like the godfather of reggaeton. You know what I mean? Like he's one of the guys that influenced the whole movement. So. That was one of our first shows. And then the next show after that, we had DJ Blas.
DJ Nelson. We're talking about, important people in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, these are the guys that push the movement, working with these artists like Daddy Yankee, Wisin and Yandel, Don Omar, just working with everyone, trying to push the genre. And then the third night, I think we had a local night with David Rolas, just to kind of switch it up. It was a good turnout, and then we also had for our fourth show, we had ANX come, actually.
Oh, cool.
We had Alcover perform, and we had Ecstasy perform his DJ set.
Nice.
And that was a good experience. I got to learn a lot from those guys, and how much hard work it takes to be in the industry.
Yeah.
So are you making these connections through the radio station, or are you just kind of reaching out, saying, hey, we've got this venue, we're looking for people, you want to come play? Or
pretty much through the radio station. I mean, you meet people and you just kind of network, you reach out to them, hey, I'm doing this. And people that aren't so big, they're not so big headed, so they'll kind of they'll work with you. And that's what I like about some of these Latin artists, is that they're willing to work with you. They're not big-headed like some other artists, and it kind of helps us because we're trying to bring a different experience here to Salt Lake City, and that definitely does help us.
I've reached out to just even some DJs that I didn't even think were of that high of a caliber that blew me off like it's nothing,
You know what I mean?
It drives me nuts. It's like, okay, never mind.
Well, yeah, at a minimum, say no.
Yeah.
At least honor me with saying
no.
Yeah,
the whole lack of reply thing just drives me nuts. It's like, oh, maybe some other time when that's really a no, but just
say
blow
no.
me off, drives me insane. But all right, that was Dirty Dave. Thanks again for coming on. Just a cool interview. Nice to meet with a local DJ here in Salt Lake.
Yeah, it was cool. One, it was fun. I always like to see somebody that's kind of doing something, and he's actively promoting events and putting on these shows for people and trying to build something up. And I think it can be really inspiring for people who, have similar interests or similar wants to sort of hear how somebody went through it.
Yep. Up next, we've got Dylan Menges. He's on Instagram as Menges Design. We, as mentioned before, had some audio difficulty. That's why we're putting him on last. So if you can bear with the audio difficulty on our end and sit through it, it's great content.
Yeah, Dylan's interview is maybe the most disappointing thing that's happened to us on this show so far, because there are very few people we've met with. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't take away from others to boost him up, but I mean, Dylan really provided us with some heavy content that I think was really beneficial for a lot of people. Just was sort of street wisdom. It wasn't all necessarily design centric, but really just life centric. And I think that we could all kind of learn from Dylan.
Well, and what was cool about him is after we were done, we sat there and rapped for another 30 minutes. We had a nice conversation after the interview, and he was still listening to that horrible sound. So, I mean, he sat on longer with us. And
yeah, if you missed the little ramble or talk up earlier at the beginning of the show, basically Dylan had called in and we couldn't hear it, but there was a horrible static sound or something
coming from our microphones,
coming from our end that was just blasting him while we were doing this interview. And God, like Mike was saying, he stuck on the line with us for the whole interview, but then another 30 minutes, just listening to this thing blaring in his ear.
And the last 30 minutes, he was just, hey, what's up? How you been? Like just a conversation,
Yeah, it was really cool. It was like old buddies by then.
Yeah.
So anyway, Dylan is on Instagram, as Mike said, at Mangus Design. And he's also right now participating in the 36 Days of Type. It's at 36 Days of Type on Instagram and also at 36daysoftype.com. It's basically not really a design competition, but a design event where letterers and illustrators put together basically an alphabet plus the numbers. And sort of do a different illustration every day for 36 days, of each individual letter or and the numbers. So starting a day and working up through 9, I guess.
That's cool.
And so anyway, Dylan's doing that right now. And if you haven't followed him or checked him out before, he's an amazing illustrator. And the work he's doing for 36 Days of Type is really interesting and cool.
Well, I want to hire him to do like a tour poster because holy cow, he's put a few out that just they're awesome. So go check him out on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. And check out his website. I think it's just mangusdesign.com. But yeah, little disclaimer, the audio quality isn't great, so we apologize for that, but it's worth sticking through.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to try and find a good chunk of just him talking where we don't really talk much, because all the bad stuff is on our end. So if I can get a good chunk of content.
Well, that's usually the case, right? All the bad stuff's on our... All right. And with that, and in closing, have an awesome week. Take a listen to Dylan and have a great one.
The one thing that's been very consistent through my childhood and until now is this act of drawing, and in a lot of variety of ways, but in both drawing in real life, looking at things and drawing them as I see them, or drawing from that memory, or drawing from reference, or drawing lettering and typography. So that...
Yeah, I think I have a turkey out of my hand, and that's about my level of artistic ability. Ryan, on the other hand, he's been drawing for a long time.
Similarly, my mother has saved a helicopter that looks a lot like a parrot that I grew when I was about 3 or 4. And that's been sort of, was my beginning as well. So one thing you mentioned in the bio that I thought was kind of an interesting thing, and I wanted to talk about it just because I think that this is something people struggle with. So many people say, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a policeman when I grew up. But you mentioned that you wanted to be a designer when you grew up. How did you know at such a young age that was it? Like, was the passion just inside you, or what was it that drove you to think that that's what you wanted to do even as a child?
I think the key thing for me was that I had people around me that saw some ability in what I was doing and gave me feedback. And
I think that's really important.
Yeah, it really is. And I feel pretty spoiled to say that, because what I do is a visual thing, obviously, right, in design. And how many people don't have some kind of visually outward ability? And I wonder how do they understand the equation of what they're supposed to do for the rest of their life? I don't know.
I think a lot of people still struggle with that. I mean, I'm 36 and I still don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah, dude. And I'm a and being a visual person and having that encouragement from childhood all the way through now in my career, Mike, I still struggle with how to define that and focus it and tune it, all that. And I have a very visual, and especially in our culture, visual stuff is so dominant. So I feel tremendously blessed and lucky to be in this place. But that to go back to the question, that was really the key thing, was having people say, simple feedback. Hey, you can draw, or whatever it was. And, that's that kind of stuff takes care of itself in terms of reinforcement and encouragement and having you, any person, take advantage of that and say, well, if you're saying that's true, I guess there must be some truth to it. So on you go.
Well, yeah, and I think that, that's a good point, is not just receiving the feedback sort of freely, but also seeking feedback from people. And, your experience is probably similar to mine. As I was drawing in school and things like that, beyond just my mom, who was a big champion of mine, my friends and people in the area, in the class or whatever, would start to recognize my ability to draw or whatever. That sort of fed that loop, it was kind of this positive input all the time. Of course, every now and then you get checked, and especially in the advertising business, you'll get all the good feedback from your friends and your mom, and then some client will take a dump on your work. But you kind of have to have that whole spectrum to really feel out, whether you're right or wrong when you're making decisions.
You mentioned something though that's really important, and that is that. It reminds me of something we were talking about with some other folks earlier last week, and that is, this is a quote or a Bible verse or something, I forget, but it basically says something like, be careful when everybody loves you. And I've been stewing on that for some reason last week or so. I can tell you why. It's a whole different topic, but I don't want to derail us. But I think it's really important to consider that, meditate on that kind of thing, and understand the importance of it. I know some younger designers now that are so focused on getting the praise of everyone around them and bringing that huddle in, that I think, man, are you really, like you said, are you getting feedback? And meaning, are you getting feedback that may be critical of your work, and are you willing to listen to that? Again, a whole other topic, but boy, what an important one.
Yeah, really important. Well, and I think it's sort of the gift and the curse of social media, right? It's very easy to publish work and get review on it.
And get the likes, the thumbs up.
You can sort of, find a self-selecting group. If it's your friends and your family, they're going to be like, oh, hey, yeah, thumbs up, hearts. But if you are sort of, if it's an open forum or if it's a client piece or whatever, the feedback may not always be positive. And especially as a designer, not to go, full blast on designer-centric discussion. But the reality is, if you can't take feedback, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You have to develop at least some semblance of thick skin.
Well, and having a core group of people that are your mentors, or people that you can show your work to, and they'll give you honest feedback, is key. It's like if all they're doing is patting your back saying, yep, good job, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to get better.
Well, and I think to Dylan's point, it's a balance, right? You do need to have some of that good feedback to sort of carry you into the business. If you're getting beat down, from your childhood on, you may try and find something else to do. So it is a balance. You do need to be checked so that you can understand the reality, but at the same time, it's good to get that positive information.
So after high school, you went to college for a little while, then you dropped out and went to the Marine Corps. How do you feel that helped in your current situation? Did you think it was a positive, or do you think it was just, I'm paying for my school with it kind of thing, or expound on that?
Oh, that's an interesting point. No, I'll clarify up front. I did not go into the military to make money or pay for school. And at the time when I went in, the Marine Corps actually had a worse deal than other branches. So I promise you, it wasn't about the money.
You did serve in Hawaii.
I did, so quick backstory there is, I went in open so I dropped out of Ohio State and dropped out before they kicked me out, which is very true. And I owed the Marine Corps some time because I was at Ohio State on a scholarship, NROTC scholarship. So it was a big failure in my life. And my parents were understandably very disappointed, but it was what it was. And, looking back all this time later, I'm glad things worked out the way they did. However, at the time I dropped out, walked away from a scholarship and went off to the Marine Corps on my own terms with a recruiter, which means I did a full 4-year tour. And when I went in what they call open contract, which means you have no pre-assigned job or pre-assigned duty station, because some guys actually negotiate that kind of thing with a recruiter. And so it wasn't until I got through a couple stages of basic and then a beyond basic training in Parris Island. At that later stage is when I found out what my job would be and what my duty station would be. So I was standing in a downpour in Texas with a staff sergeant in front of me who didn't like me and didn't like anybody, I don't think.
Screaming at you.
And his job that night was to basically soak us in this rainstorm, and then during that, yell out our duty stations. And at that time, I found out that I was going to be a 5811, which is a military policeman, which is basically means a grunt with a badge. And he said, Mangus, Camp Smith, Hawaii. And I thought, sweet, I'll stand here in the rain. This is fun. So yeah, I was able to serve in Hawaii, my full tour, about 3.5 years of it. And at the time, I wasn't married, but I got married to Janet, and she was able to join me out there. And we had a pretty awesome life. I worked 12-hour shifts for the Marine Corps, and then when I wasn't working, I was surfing or hanging out with Janet, or both. And it was pretty cool. Incredible blessing.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. That doesn't sound bad. So to kind of go back to Mike's point, though, do you think that maybe some of the discipline from school, like, I don't know. So for me, a common thing I come back to is discipline, mm-hmm. and the importance of being disciplined when it comes to work, or if you're trying to run a business. Things like that, So were you already a pretty disciplined guy, or did you take away from the Marine Corps some added discipline that might be helping you now as you work through your career and now into opening your own shop?
I knew discipline from growing up because having a dad who was a career Army guy, Korea, Vietnam veteran, combat in both. Just we had a pretty strict household, so I knew discipline. But in terms of self-discipline, I'm going to be really transparent and tell you I've struggled with that all my life. So,
well, good. I'm glad to know it's not just me.
Yeah. So when I went into the Marine Corps, it was obviously a lot of things happening there that were not positive. And part of that was I went in angry, disappointed in myself, hurt, because of what I'd hurt my parents. A lot of things. Again, a lot of things I was dealing with. So what I was looking for was, number one, to fulfill an obligation, but two, I really did want to serve in the military in some capacity. It's why I'd signed up for the original deal at Ohio State. So what came out of that and through it was the same thing you said. It was a better understanding of discipline, some structure in my life, which I had blown off for a couple of years at Ohio State, and some redirection, refocus, all those kind of, buzzword type things, but they were all true. And then, of course, to be doing that, refocusing and doing something different in a place like Hawaii was a nice bonus. So it was a bit of obviously pleasure living in Hawaii, but it was also helped me understand that I didn't want to be a career military guy in the time that I served as an enlisted guy in the Marine Corps. I loved it, loved the guys I was with to a point, but when I was done with 4 years, it was time to go back to. I felt it was time to go back to college and finish that degree, and that's what I did.
So you went back to Ohio State?
No, I came back to Columbus and went to CCAD, Columbus College of Art and Design, which is obviously the big design school here in Columbus.
So you got a bachelor in visual communication. Mm-hmm. Is that different than a normal, say, art degree or advertising degree? What's different with a visual communication degree?
No, it's the same thing as a graphic design, advertising kind of a degree. It's just CCAD spin on it.
Okay.
So this is something I want to ask, and I know for a few different designers I've talked to, it's for some reason comes off like a little bit of a sensitive subject, but I want to just get your take on it. What do you think, sort of as a senior guy and somebody who's been working as a designer in advertising for a long time, what's your take on the importance of a formal education versus, coming up through the ranks or your School of Hard Knocks style education?
Man, that's a great question. That's a whole podcast all by itself, isn't it?
It really is. And I mean, you obviously made school a priority. You started, you stopped, but you did go back and you did finish. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, for people who don't go maybe a traditional route, or what would be considered traditional, by going through, high school and college and then starting, as a grunt in an agency and moving up the ranks. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the idea of being self-taught versus an education? Or do you think, are there things that you learned from your education that made it valuable enough that you would sort of encourage people to go that route?
Let me try to unpack this as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, sorry, it is a big question.
It's a great question, and I think it's a question that's all the more relevant right now. And I want to make sure I capture that in my comments. But first of all, I love what I got from CCAD, and I understand the school's changed a bit over the years, but there was a foundation year when I was there that no matter what major you chose, the foundation was intentionally titled. You were there to learn how to sketch, do some modeling, so some three-dimensional stuff, some graphic design work. Computers were coming into play then. Yes, that's how old I am. But there was a really nice balance of stuff that got your hands in a lot of different things. And I'm so thankful for that, especially the foundation year. But all of my 4 years, because I ended up doing a full 4 years, that speaks to how badly I did at Ohio State. But anyway, so I did a full deal there. But I learned so much at CCAD, and I'm really thankful for it. Now, let me switch gears. If you look at my friend Jeremy Slagle at slagledesign.com, Jeremy doesn't have a college degree. And no one will argue this point. And if they are, they're idiots. I'll just say it. Jeremy is one of the most talented designers I've ever met, will ever meet. He's incredibly gifted in a wide range of skills. And Jeremy is a self-taught guy. He took a few college courses, but he never finished an official degree. And again, I would encourage anyone listening to this, go to Slagle Design and look at the depth and the breadth of Jeremy's work and understand, again, the context is he's self-taught. Now, Jeremy, and that's what, there's something important about Jeremy, though, that has to be understood before anybody hears this and says, wow, great, well, I can skip all that and I can just go teach myself and watch YouTube videos. There's a really critical thing about Jeremy that has to be true, I believe, of anybody who takes that route. And it's something you guys mentioned a few minutes ago. If you're going to go down that road, you've got to be willing to listen hard to the instruction that you get. You've got to be willing to hear feedback and seek feedback, seek the hard stuff, and then, of course, apply and work and work and work. That's the key. And that's something that Jeremy has done over the years. If he didn't know how to do a certain thing, he taught himself. If he didn't know how to do photography, he taught himself. And he's taught me how to be a better photographer since. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good approach. Because basically, I think self-taught or whether you go traditional route, the moral is kind of the same, right? It's hard work. Yep. It's lots of reps. It's continually learning and education. And so I think that, whichever track you choose, the moral is the same. I know about a 50-50 mix of folks who've gone the traditional route and folks who haven't. And, I can't say that anyone is any better than another. Everybody's gone their way. But I always think it's interesting to get people's take on that. Because for the folks that, are sort of self-made or did skip college, I just sort of was curious your perspective as sort of somebody that's been in the business for a while.
Yeah, I think the last thing, if I can add one more point, is the world's changed a lot since I graduated CCAD. And since Jeremy and I met and have worked with each other and between each other for 20 years. And that is what you guys already know is there's things out there like Skillshare. There's some super high quality instruction online. And if it's not high quality, people will call you on it. So I love that about the day that we live in terms of getting quality instruction at a different price point, a lot cheaper, obviously, than college. And I think there's a model out there that kind of blends all that stuff that maybe even says, you don't necessarily need a college degree, but what does that blended model look like? I don't know, but I'll tell you, here's a little reveal. I'm working towards putting together some instructional videos because I love to teach. I love to help people learn stuff. I love learning stuff. And I'm starting to outline some videos that work toward that end, which is to say, maybe you don't need to go to design school. What if you could take a handful of courses that could really build a foundation for you over the course of whatever that time period is that you do on your own track.
Yeah, and I think I can sort of, I completely agree with that, and I think it's really important. I guess, one thing that the internet has sort of fostered is this interest in sharing and giving your take and putting it out there for the world to see.
Yep.
And I think that's a pretty cool thing about the internet. Like for me, for example, I went to school at a smaller university that didn't have a art-specific program. It just had like a marketing or a mass communications, as it was called. And so, it was kind of advertising, but it had a lot of news writing and stuff in it that wasn't relevant to me. And so a lot of the skills that I picked up over the years were self-taught in a time, I'm not that much younger than you, and, so sort of in a time when it was hard to get that kind of information. I learned how to build websites because the only way to have a website was to build it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, the moral of the story is this idea of working hard and being able to go back and learn from others.
Well, when I went to school for audio engineering, and they actually signed us up for lynda.com in college, and some of our assignments were to just go on and listen, watch the video and come back and talk about it in class kind of thing. And after jumping into that and actually seeing what's actually available online, and that there are courses like that available for, $30 a month roughly.
Yeah.
I just kept a subscription going after I got out, and I've learned a little Photoshop, I've learned a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and anything I need, I just kind of jump on there and take a quick, refresher, and it's quite nice. I like that.
Yeah.
So after you graduated from CCAD, you went and worked in an agency for a few years, and how long were you in the agency? What were your takeaways from working in an agency versus being on your own now? And, did that, obviously, you learn more in the real world than you do in college, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What were your takeaways from actual agency life versus being on your own?
Well, this is where I become the stinker for some people when I talk about this part of my career. But it's all good. I hope it's good. There's lessons to be learned from stuff, and I'll jump right into it. One of the biggest things I learned after doing agency life for about 18 years was scale is everything for me. That's what it meant for me. And let me unpack that as, again, try to be efficient here with the time. I actually learned from a former boss who told me directly that we make money on inefficiency. And I thought, wow, that's terrible. But I realized he was right. That was the nature of the agency I was in, and it was also the nature of other places I had worked. And please know, I don't believe in naming agencies or naming people when I have these conversations. I think I hate gossip. But the big takeaway for me was, again, at a certain scale of agency, and again, those numbers vary, but past a certain number of people, you are in a process that is just pretty inefficient, to put it nicely. And I understood over time what he meant by we make money on inefficiency. And so I don't bring that up to say, and that was the worst moment of my agency life. It's just, it was a realization and a kind of a moment of truth. And it was one of many things that made me start to think about how I could do something differently, which ultimately led to opening Mingus Design a few years ago, or 2015.
Yeah. Also, I guess sort of to that point about agency life, maybe on the positive front, were there any takeaways that you took from working in an agency that prepared you for starting your own company?
Yeah. So great question. And absolutely. And I'm so blessed to have spent my time in every single agency I was in, and I mean that. Even the times when I was standing at, with that guy and thinking, "Wow, he's right. We're making money off of inefficiency." I'm so deeply grateful for every one of my bosses, all of those coworkers, because I learned so much, good and bad, but so much good from those experiences. And to me, there's no way I could have started Mingus Design until now. Because I know it's an easy thing to say, well, I bet you wish you'd have done this several years ago. Not really. I wasn't ready for it. And I know a pretty junior designer that came to me last year, and he was working a gig that was not an agency. It was more of a private deal. And he said, I'd like to make a move. What should I do? And I said, dude, go find an agency job. And here's why. I said, you're not going to find the perfect job, number one. Number two, that agency job, whether it's large or small, is going to come with some dynamics that you will never find if you're solo or if you're working in a non-agency environment. And I said, those dynamics are going to shape you for the rest of your life and your career, and you're going to be so thankful that you did them. And I said, let me be clear. They're not going to be fun all the time. There's going to be pain points there. And the dynamics are things like dealing with difficult clients and long hours and work that you don't want to do and at levels that you don't want to do. And, the confusion of career path and evaluations and all this stuff that comes with agencies. But I said, it's all extremely valuable. So the ending of that story, at least the status of that story, is this dude went off and started his own deal. And he's a young guy. He's never worked in an agency. And what I'm watching now from a distance is kind of a train wreck, because he's
learning by the school of hard knocks.
Yeah. But in his mind, in his perception, he's surrounded himself by people. He's surrounded himself by people who are giving him all that praise, like we talked about earlier. And he's locked into a style that a lot of people like. It's that, Draplin thick line thing, and he's all locked into this, and he's in his own little bubble. And here's the problem, because I don't want to, again, make it sound like I'm just, trying to crush this kid's dreams. But when I look at that situation, I think two things. One, I will never be able to hire him. I can't hire him to help me with work, even though I wish I could. He's a nice guy. But I can't help him to hire me because I know exactly what I'm going to get in every single communication solution. It's going to be a rainbow bucket of colors and thick lines. I can't work with that, right? And then two, of course, a savvy client's going to see the same thing and realize, that may not be appropriate for me. So,
well, and I think that's good advice. It's funny because, like, in my career, I sort of reverse engineered it. I used to work in-house for a book publishing company. And at some point, I started freelancing at night and just doing design work in the evenings. And after a few years at the book publisher, they laid me off. And I sort of was thrust into work for myself. So I started just sort of professional freelancing, and it evolved into a company. And at the time, I was calling myself a creative agency. However, at the time, I had not set foot in an ad agency. And so there's sort of for me, I was more artist than business person, and so that's why I sort of went that route. And then down the road, it became apparent to me, just as I got a little older and I started to recognize, that I needed to pick up some more skills. I started pinging ad agencies in the area. So I'm from Idaho originally, so I was hitting up the Salt Lake area and Boise, Idaho area. And they, and asking these agencies, hey, I'll donate a month of my time in exchange for the opportunity to come run the business. And, I reached out to a lot of different places, and not a lot of places bit. In fact, only one did. And, but they took me up on it, and they put me in a pool of designers and let me work with their team for a month, and then allowed me to sort of sit in on meetings, and creative meetings, and agency meetings, and all these different things, so I could just sort of start to learn the business of it. So after doing that, 2 years later, they asked me to come down and come to work for them. And then, it's a long story of layoffs and employments and all these different things. But I still work with this same agency today because of sort of that groundwork. Basically, I was able to show my character by offering my time. And they sort of showed me their character by being willing to give me that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, so it's a little bit of a reverse engineering, but I think the moral is the same. It's, going to work for, in the industry that you want to be in and learning how to run a business if your ultimate goal is to go work for yourself.
That's a cool story. I've never heard anybody do that before.
Yeah, well, and I don't think these guys had either.
They're like, what?
Yeah, no, I in the years since then, now I operate my company out of Salt Lake City. And so I've had opportunity to meet with a lot of these agencies who I hit up all those years ago. And, met with some of their people and stuff. And that's kind of the response is, wow, that was pretty crazy. ask to come sit in our meetings, all that stuff. But I mean, it worked out, and so I think it was a back way into the business, but it worked. So that works for me.
So you said in 2015 you opened your own design firm, Mangus Designs. What were some of the major hurdles that you had to kind of overcome just starting your own business, and learning curve involved with that?
Well, and maybe before you get into that, let me just ask you, and this is just precursor to that question, but what was the nudge that pushed you out of agency life and into doing your own? Everybody I know that's working in an agency wants to go out on their own at some point, but most of them are too afraid to actually take that step, or fear the worst or whatever. But I wonder if you had a sort of a pinnacle moment that changed your trajectory and was like, okay, now it's the moment.
Okay, this is going to be the most unsexy answer, but I didn't have a big aha lightning bolt in the lap kind of moment. It was actually a series of things over the long haul that I had been pushing towards, little things that were kind of chipping away at me. And again, I hate to paint the picture like chipping away is not the right term. There is some of that. There's the frustration of seeing how things are done and thinking I can do that better. It's one of the oldest ways of hearing these kind of stories play out. But there was the other consistent thing on a very positive note, which was I was going in reverse of what I really enjoyed the most, and that was actually making the stuff, designing stuff. So I was on the classic trajectory from, well, not to spell it all out, but you guys know the drill, right? Going from an art design
designer, graphic designer, to art director, creative director, to
executive creative director. So right. Here I am making killer money, and yet I wasn't happy. I wasn't content.
Yeah, at some point, it becomes all business, and everyone else is doing all fun stuff. Yeah.
So Mangus Design was not started out of frustration as the primary reason. It was started out of a motivation to make design again, to create stuff.
I like that.
So now, transitioning back to Mike's sort of original question, and some things you may have had to overcome. When you started business, at least was my experience as a freelancer and things like that, when I actually began company and sort of rolled into business, I already had a little bit of a client base and things like that. But can you talk a little bit about hurdles you had to overcome in getting started, learning the way, and you may have been senior enough in an agency that you had a good understanding of business and taxes, payroll, all that kind of good stuff. But were there any, hiccups you hit along the way trying to get started before you really sort of hit your stride?
Well, the last thing you just mentioned was something that I was completely unaware of in terms of payroll and, this formal business structure, formal business knowledge. I've been freelancing off and on for years, but I had really no idea how to run a business. I didn't know what the difference between a S Corp and an LLC was, or how to set that up. I knew nothing really. So what I did do, and I mentioned in a couple talks, one last year here in Columbus at a design conference, I said I spent a year setting things up in advance, or at least I shouldn't say a year. Like I didn't have an actual timeline, like this is the exact time, but I started working towards that and doing the basics, setting up, looking into naming and setting up the business structure as an LLC or something else. And how do I do that? Reading about taxes. But one of the key things that I did that was so helpful, and I highly recommend this, is because I'll never be able to encapsulate it in this podcast. I started Googling phrases like, what I wish I knew 5 years ago. And I did that, of course, in a freelancer's context or, a small design studio context. But that kind of a phrase, what I learned in the last 5 years or what I wish I knew kind of stuff. Man, I'll tell you what, you talk about peeling your head back and getting a face full of information all at once. It was great because there's plenty of great posts out there where people are willing to say, man, if I had these 3 things lined up, I would have saved so much time and effort, etc.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, so I compiled a lot of that and didn't rush into opening Mangus Design. Instead, I ruminated on those things for months, and again did some of these other administrative, clerical, business setup type things. All that stuff kind of happening before I actually launched the business, which I know sounds kind of straightforward. Like, well, why wouldn't you do that? Well, the reality is, like that kid I mentioned earlier, a lot of people, I find out, don't do that.
Yeah, so, I was that kid.
Oh, yeah.
That was me. So I can relate.
Well, and Mike, before I make it sound like and because I did all these things, everything was great. That is not true either. I was smart enough to get an accountant from day one. And so I made some smart decisions, thankfully, because of other people in my life who were bold enough to say, hey, Dylan, were's an area where you suck, and here's something you got to take care of. Or on a little kinder note, saying, here's a couple things I would consider. So I like we've said throughout this podcast, I went out and sought advice and said, tell me what I don't know. And isn't it amazing when you ask people that or request that, they will tell you what you don't know. People love to share their knowledge. So simply asking and listening is amazing.
Yeah, and the other part of that, as you mentioned earlier too, is you've got to be able to hear that and ingest it and actually do something. Because so many people are so resistant to accepting feedback, or you'll ask somebody for advice, but they don't really want your advice. They just kind of say, yes. But anyway, I know that I found just being sort of a lifelong design guy and somebody who's very used to getting critique and giving critique, that I find myself getting in trouble sometimes when I give people sort of straight honesty. For example, we've been dealing with some problems at our kids' school. My youngest is getting himself in trouble and in the principal's office all the time. And I sent sort of a little email to the teachers the other day just saying, hey, this is what's wrong and this is how I think we could fix it. And it just caused this whole firestorm at the school. Like, oh my God, what are we supposed to do with all this? And for me, I just felt like I was being honest, and giving a straight critique. This is how you would fix that problem. But that wasn't what they were really looking for. What they really wanted was sort of a softer touch. So I find myself getting in trouble every now and then.
Well, you mentioned all those news writing courses that you didn't care for years ago.
Yeah. Now everybody else is paying for it. So, well, it's funny because my design program was actually run by I guess he would have been he was a lawyer, but he was sort of a law guy in the creative realm. And so for him, he had also come from a journalism background, and so he really pushed journalism. So we did a ton of writing, in what should have been kind of a design program. And so, I won't bag on the program too much, but I'm largely self-taught. So I guess everybody gets a different college experience, which is also part of why I asked that question. I just I'm always curious. I like to find sort of similarities and differences in people's experience. And where you and I are sort of similar in age, I think it's really interesting to sort of, hear what you're saying, because you're sort of saying the same experiences that I have. And I guess it makes you feel more, comfortable with where you're at. So I wanted to ask you something. So, of course, one of the most difficult things, or hardest thing for me, because we've been considering rebrand on our company, or maybe even starting a whole new thing. Naming a company is really difficult. Obviously, it was easy for you using your name, but there's a little thing I wanted to ask you about in your logo. There's a little lightning bolt, and I heard there's a little backstory to that.
Yep, there's a quick backstory. I'll mention the naming thing really quickly, because it was another little aha moment for me. I went through this exercise of all these clever names and trying to be clever and more cleverness and how clever can I be? And I realized, wait a second, Menges is a weird, obscure name, even in Germany, its origin. And when you think about how Google likes oddballs, it's hard to differentiate if your name's Smith. No offense to the Smiths in the world, but
that's me, Mike Smith.
Yeah, Mike Smith. Sorry, Mike. But that's a tough. If you were to do MikeSmith.com, you might have a hard time, finding the cash to buy that one. Yeah, let alone to get the search engine to find the unique Mike Smith. But it's doable, but harder. So I realized Menges is so weird that why not use that name? So that was a nice little aha moment. Again, nice little blessing to have a strange last name. But it worked out pretty well and stopped me from doing a lot of additional naming exercises. But back to the logo, there's really two things to share there. And one is that you mentioned the rebranding. Then as well as I do that even the mention of that, especially when you're saying rebranding yourself, makes you just want to don sackcloth and ashes and grind your teeth down to nubs because it's just painful.
It's true. This rebrand of mine has been going on for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, he just won't stop talking about it.
Yeah, no, I in my soul, I want to do it, but I'm yet to actually pull the trigger. I can do it for a client all day, but for myself, it's a problem.
I laugh when I shouldn't. I mean, I know that pain. trying to put levity on the pain of that. So the logo is what I try to sell my clients and create for my clients is the simplest possible thing. But the story behind the logo is the fact that I got struck by lightning as a kid.
Wow.
It was a pretty normal day. I was hanging out with my 2 neighbor friends, these brothers, and we were in an open field. And it wasn't until actually just a few years ago I learned that lightning doesn't really care a lot about distance. And I didn't know this, but I didn't realize that lightning can actually arc sideways pretty significantly.
Uh-huh.
And so we were in this field that didn't indicate that there was a massive storm coming in, but it was definitely, some rumblings. So not a lot of warning. And the next thing I know, there was this tremendous boom. And the next thing, I woke up laying on the ground.
So I was close to getting struck in the Philippines. I walked out of my house and all the hair on my body stood up. It was the weirdest thing. I was just maybe 100 feet away from the house, and lightning struck, and it was about 100 yards away. But did your hair stand up on end?
I don't remember because it was so fast. It was literally the flash boom.
Okay.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was it. So I woke up and I remember, eyes opening and looking up at the older brother, and he was looking down at me like, what the heck? and I said, I think I'm going to go home now. And I remember he looked down and just kind of nodded at me like, yeah, that's a good idea. And the only weird thing beyond the strike, of course, or some indication of two things was we don't know exactly what happened. And I'll tell you guys the weird reason why we don't know what happened exactly. But I bicycled home and I could not stay awake the rest of the afternoon because this was kind of a midday thing. I was just exhausted. That was the only physical repercussion of the incident.
Didn't taste metal or anything.
Yeah, I couldn't taste metal. I got a heck of a twitch. You guys should see it. I'll show you sometime. No, it's terrible. But the next day I was fine. Supposedly. And the reason I don't know the intricate details, meaning, okay, if I had no physical burns, then did it really strike me, or did it strike at the couple feet away from me? And the reason I don't know is because I was with those same 2 brothers about a handful of years later, and the 3 of us were in a freak Jeep accident that killed one of the brothers and left the other one. Not the healthiest guy. And again, please know, the world's too small, and if the right people hear this, they'll know who those guys are. And I don't say that to say anything bad against them or their family, but we were in this freak accident, and I was thrown 100-some feet through the air, according to the sheriff's report. I landed in between the only opening big enough for a human body in what was a long ditch full of old concrete and rebar. And I crawled out of that and walked to a van, and with just a scratch on my back and a concussion.
Wow.
So freaky stuff.
Yeah, right.
And so so obviously, like I said, the one brother died a few days later of massive head trauma, and the other brother, I've never had a chance to speak to him and say, do you remember that incident in the field? What did you see? Because they were just they were probably 20, 30 feet away from me when it happened.
Well, and so maybe, as a child, maybe you were too young to take much away from it, but as an adult, you look back on these things, and not to get too sort of spiritual or ethereal or whatever, but have they had any positive or negative effect on your life?
I could see someone getting really depressed about stuff like that and having a hard time getting over it.
Well, at the same time, you might feel sort of
lucky, blessed.
Yeah, I think that's where my takeaway's been. I shouldn't say I think. I know that's where my takeaway's been. There's always that element of darkness about the story, especially the accident, of course. But between those two incidents alone, and other times in my life where I was clearly not supposed to be alive, I've cheated death several times. And including just a few years ago, I wrecked a sports car, and that was the end of my love for cars. I was done. It's a horrible accident. And so in all those things, and that's where this lightning bolt logo comes from, I see it as a positive in that I believe there's a God, and I believe that he has interest in us, even though we a lot of times don't have interest in him and by the way we think and act, and yet he's there and has this desire to have some kind of hangout time with us, to put it casually. And so the lightning bolt logo represents this idea that we are energy, and we are created energy, and we're meant to be creative energy outwardly. And of course, it also makes a capital M, which is kind of convenient for any business. There you go.
Cool. So let's transition back to the business. So, by and large, do you consider yourself more of an illustrator or a letterer? And how did you sort of identify your niche?
I keep going, but I'll tell you, this is a whole other podcast, good and bad. Was just talking to Diane Gibbs on the Design and Recharge show about specializing versus generally being a generalist or a specialist. And I'm still struggling with that, because I think a lot of people see me, especially with Instagram, they see me as an illustrator, letterer guy. And yet when I started the business, I was doing this to create identity for people, identity design for businesses. That was it. And I might do some illustration and lettering. And like this Sweet Carrot job I just finished up, the client's name is Sweet Carrot here in Columbus. That was a full-blown illustration job done as a mural in 2 rooms in their new restaurant. And so I've picked up, and that's just one example, but I've got more of that work coming. And I keep getting requests to do the work that I keep showing on Instagram. It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's really cool, as I peruse your website and things like that, the typographic work is very cool. Very illustrative, though, so maybe, it sort of falls into that category of illustrator. But, and obviously there's a lot of identity work and things on your website. But I think that, the typography is amazing, the lettering is amazing, and it's clear that you have an interest or a level of education in typography that maybe not every designer has.
Yeah, so to try to answer your question a little more succinctly, I think ultimately I am I like to think of myself as just a designer. I want to keep calling myself as a designer, and that's it. But I think in terms of asking the question in a different way and saying, what would you do 8 or 10 hours a day, even if you didn't get paid for it, I'd probably sit and draw letters and cartoons and some type of character illustration. So that's what I wrestle with is, yes, I'm a designer. I'm a formally trained designer. I've spent my career doing interactive design and brand identity design and branding companies and all that. And now here with this studio of Mingus Design, I find myself doing what I just described, what I would be doing 8 hours a day if nobody was paying me to do it.
Yeah.
Just so people are paying me to do it.
I would definitely encourage people to go check out the Design Recharge show that you're talking about. However, is it possible for you to give us just a little snapshot of what you think that, in 10 words or less, whether you think generalization or specialization is a better way to go? And maybe varies by person.
Less, man.
I'm happy to give you as much form. I said I guess it depends by person, but feel free to take as much time as you like. But I don't want to take people away from going and just listening to her show as well. But I think that's a huge question for designers. We spoke with a guy, Ian Paget.
I was just going to bring that up because he focuses on logos.
Yeah, he runs LogoGeek.uk, and his specialty, he's also sort of a rounded designer, but logos are what he sells, and that's what he does. It's branding 100% of the time. And so in his case, he made a very strong argument for specializing. And so I was just curious, what your take was.
So my current take on it, because I swear this fluctuates month to month, it's why I struggle with it, is in the culture in which we live, I feel like specialization is where I'm leaning, because and this may sound like a crappy answer, so I apologize, but that's where my head's at lately, is our culture is so time-starved that no one will make the time to look at my site and say, wow, he does a lot of different things, and maybe some of these things will apply to me. Let me unpack that a little bit longer. What I would love to do is tell people I'm a designer, and design does different things for different communication needs. It redefines, like an identity design, or design illustrates. Okay, in the case of illustration, I could say design captures in the case of photography, which I also do, or design repurposes, which might talk about making sculpture out of recycled materials or something. Again, I keep going back to that. The design is the thing, and that will always be the umbrella. But yet, what I think maybe the truth of it is, I need to look at those categories and go photography, illustration, identity design, whatever else. What's that thing that you truly love to do? And is it a commercially marketable thing? And if so, focus on that and roll with it.
Cool.
All right. Killer.
Alrighty, I'll chop this up and make it work.
All right, thanks, man. I know that's a ton of work for you. So
it is what it is.
So cool, man. All right, I'm gonna go to bed. It's 1:30 or midnight or almost 1.
All right, have a good day tomorrow.
All right, man. I'll catch up with you. Yep.